Hello. I don't know why I keep forgetting to press go live lately. This is driving me insane. I just started though, so things are okay at least. Actually, we can go back. Yay, okay. This is where it starts, so we really weren't far in. But I can't believe I forgot to press start. I was sitting here on starty screen thinking it started already, but no, I'm just dumb. Okay, we're trying again. This is A Cage of Roses by 2.5 Studios, the same makers of A Date with Death, so I am very, very excited to see how this goes. Faster, Miki, faster. You have to keep moving or else... Oh god, they're gaining on us. Miki ran through the forest as quickly as her legs would carry her, which, given how exhausted she felt, was not very. She tried to obey Henny's orders, fearful both of letting her friend down and of the shadowy figures which pursued them, but her body refused to listen. Her legs felt numb, insensible, as unfeeling as marble, but far weaker. That's an interesting comparison. It was through sheer force of will that she was able to keep going, and that alone, for all her strength, had already left her. Even as Miki ran, staggering blindly through the fog, she feared it was a lost cause. She was but a young woman, slender, and while not so very short, quite unaccustomed to exerting herself. She was not like Henny, who spent her days on her hands and knees, polishing the floors and blacking the fireplaces. Miki's fingers were white as ivory, while Henny's were red and raw through the demanding, often physical labor. Miki's lungs, meanwhile, were straining from the agonizing effort of running. Never before had she known that the act of merely existing could be so exhausting. Miki, please, you need to hurry, quickly. Henny reached back to take hold of Miki's hand, her coarse, short fingernails digging into Miki's palm. Henny was gripping so tightly it hurt, but Miki knew should she continue to tarry, she would be in for far, far greater than this. What is going on? Oh, Miki recalled how her father had looked back in their carriage, his eyes wide and his face unusually pale. Miki had never seen her father look so scared before. He was a tall, imposing figure of a man, dashing even in his early 50s, who was accustomed to issuing orders, not receiving them. Miki had thought her father immovable, much like the oak tree which shielded her family's mausoleum, which had stood there longer than the crypt itself, its trunk wide, its boughs weathered. But Miki had learned that even her father had weaknesses. She had once thought her father a force of nature, quite impossible to argue with or to get the better of, but this supposition had then been turned on its head in a mere handful of minutes. For all of his bluster, Miki's father was only human. He was made of flesh and blood like Miki, and when cut, he would bleed. Is her father dead? He had bled a lot, in fact. Oh my god, he is dead. He had bled a lot, in fact, all over the plush upholstered seats of their carriage and onto the floor. Well, that's not traumatizing at all. His fine clothes had been stained black with the stuff, and the air had stunk of it, sharp and tinny. Miki could smell her father's blood on her even now. As she and Henny raced through the forest, she couldn't forget it, however much she wished to. Oh, hi Adeline. How do you pronounce Miki? Micah? Is it Micah? I was between Micah and Miki, Micah. I can look it up. It is Micah. You're right.
Micah.
Okay, we'll go with Micah. I can fix it now. Hi, Adeline. Oh, if only the events of that night had been nothing more than a bad dream. Micah wished that the fog would clear and that she would awake, her eyelids fluttering to discover herself sitting once more in her bed, in her home, the room flooded with pale sunlight. Micah! But Micah's surroundings did not shift. The trees continued to press in about her as though they meant to eat her alive. Their shadowy pursuers were beginning to close in on them. Micah couldn't Micah couldn't outrun them no matter how she tried. She was flagging, her heart hammering in her throat. What would happen when Micah was not so optimistic to hope for an if they caught her? What would they do to Henny? The thought was almost much more than Micah could bear. It had been bad enough to lose her parents, but to lose Henny too? She had done nothing wrong. Henny was no lady, she was just a maid. She was only being targeted because of her relationship to Micah and her family. Had Henny been traveling alone, she would have passed through the forest quite unscathed. It wasn't as though Henny had any valuables upon her person that were worth the effort of pilfering. Henny. Micah appealed to her maid between sharp gasps of air, which pierced her lungs as knitting needles might. Please, let me go. Leave me be. I'm just slowing you down. No, Micah, I can't do that. But there aren't any buts. I won't leave you behind. That's not what friends do. Ah. But Henny, I said that there aren't any buts. Now let's keep running. Micah wanted to run. She did. But her body had already begun to give in. Her heart might have been pumping fit to burst at the bottom of her throat, but her legs were weak despite the excess blood which filled her, and her hand in Henny's felt cold and clammy. She couldn't keep going. It wasn't possible. She had exhausted all of her energy simply in escaping from the carriage where her parents' body lay. Now she would die, only a few hundred paces away from their final resting place. Would her mutilated carcass be discovered in the days hence and taken back to her family's home? Would she and her parents be embalmed and sealed away within their mausoleum? Mausoleum. I'm sticking with mausoleum. Micah did not much like this thought. Her family's mausoleum was a terrifying place, full of somber stone angels. Arin, yeah! You know what? I saw an asset. We're getting off topic. But I saw an asset that won't go with this one, but I want to use it eventually. It was a witch's hat that was inspired by Purin. Hold on, I sent it to my friend. The assets looks home. Hi Steph, hi Malkay. Let me see if I can. Wait. I know I sent it to my friend. It was so cute. This is probably not the time for it, but that's okay. Getting ready for spooky season. Yeah. I still have no idea what spooky games to play. Oh. I can't find it. I think I lost it. I'll look for it later. But I'll find at least one semi-scary game to play. Bloomtown's supposed to be a scary game, but it was not that scary at all. So I'm trying to find another one that I can handle. Anyways. It was quiet, being situated among tall trees, but its quietude was not at all relaxing. It was quiet. Its quiet was a deep, fathomless silence of death. Ooh. You know what they say, dance with death. Micah did not want to die. She knew not how she would continue to live on, with both her parents slaughtered before her very eyes, but she did not want to succumb as they had, in this forest full of fog. She wanted to go on living, for her sake, and for Henny's. Though not necessarily for Walters. Who is Walter? God, they're getting closer. We need to keep running. Come on, Micah. But, like the guttering flame of a candle, the last of her energy had been expended. Micah's foot caught in a tangled tree root, which jutted from the ground like a bear trap, and she fell. Her hand, which was slick with sweat, slipped free from Henny's. Her fingers extended forth, plumbing the mist for Henny, but to little avail. Micah! Henny's voice echoed in Micah's ears, shrill and frantic along with her own pulse. Her heart juddered in her chest, hard, as though meaning to stop altogether, but it did little good. Her head smacked against the ground with a dull, anticlimactic thud, her auburn curls strewn across scattered leaves, the broken twigs. Micah's teeth bit against her tongue. She tasted copper. Her vision swam. Micah, oh God, Micah, get up, please, get up. And then everything went black. Act 1. The Night That Never Ended. Ooh! This is gonna be fun. Oi! Sorry, my dog wanted to be let into the room. Okay, but I'm excited. Let's go. Oh, she's pretty. What? When Micah finally awoke, she was greeted by a dull, crushing pain that gripped her skull like a vice. A brackish taste akin to pond water filled her mouth, and with one hand clasped to her head, she coughed. Micah's body shuddered and her lungs burned. It took a minute before her coughing fit subsided. She is very pretty. Dude, I'm excited to see the vampire. I'm gonna be real with you. I'm ready to question my sexuality yet again. That's where I'm at. I know I'm straight, but good Lord knows I will crumble before a pretty vampire. Anyways. It took a minute before her coughing fit subsided, but once it did, Micah began to glance uneasily around her surroundings. She hoped that her... I love woman, woo! Vampire lady, yeah! She hoped that her immediate surroundings might shed some light upon her predicament, but her hopes were in vain. Micah did not recognize any of the geometry which encaged her thus. The floor upon which she was sitting, but why was she sitting on the floor of all things, was made of stone, which felt hard and cold and uncompromising. The walls, too, were made of stone, as was the ceiling, which felt very far away. A wooden cot was pushed up close against one of the walls, but it was so steeped in shadows Micah could scarcely make it out. There was a chamber pot lying by the cot, which, upon closer inspection, was empty, but its rim and sides were stained with caked-on filth. Ew. A truly unpleasant odor exuded from the chamber pot, which made Micah's eyes sting. It was fortunate that she had no immediate desire to relieve herself, for she had no desire to use this commodity. A quick examination of the room, though really it was more like a cell, showed Micah that, save for the cot and the chamber pot, it was utterly desolate. There was no other furniture to be seen, no shelves, no cupboards, nor even a proper bed. There was no mirror either, so Micah could not see herself, but perhaps this was a blessing in disguise. Micah doubted she would be at her best, now being so very in pain and so very exhausted. She was so cold she could feel goosebumps rippling across her flesh, and her teeth were chattering badly. Also, is the sounds and everything okay? Can you guys hear me okay and the game okay, hopefully? Micah wound her arms around her middle and shivered sadly. It was not only the chamber pot that stunk. The very air itself was rank. Everything's good. Thank you, I'm glad. Yay. Heavy with the stench of unwashed bodies and general decay. Dude, honestly, personally, I probably would have passed out from the smell already. This room, this cell, reeked of death. How had she come to such a place? What had happened to her? Micah can remember sitting alongside her mother and her father in their carriage, as it bore them through the forest, and then there, at this most pivotal of moments, her memories failed her. Micah could recall nothing else. Amnesia? Now what was she to do? Had her parents been there, they would have given her instructions. They always seemed to know what Micah ought to be doing at any given time, but they were not here, and they were not there, and neither was Henny. Micah was all alone. Henny had been with her, Micah was certain, before what? Why could she not remember anything? Oh, Micah thought sorrowfully, if only she was made of stone, then perhaps her head would not hurt so much. It really did feel like her skull might explode, not from the pain, though the pain still remained, but from raw, unbridled fear. Micah had often dreamed of stealing away from her parents' home to embark upon a brand new life, unfettered by expectations, but she had never wished for this. Tears began to trickle down Micah's cheeks in crystalline droplets. They scored tracks in the dirt, which caked her cheeks and dropped, one by one, to the floor upon which she sat. Seems like Micah had a pretty sheltered life. I think so. I think she's supposed to be a noble lady. I read the description of the game, and it's like a noble lady and a vampire. But her family ran a mausoleum, which is like a funeral? Well, no, not a funeral. Like a graveyard, but a building. A very fine tomb, often with a monument. A tomb. There we go. That's a good word for it. Which is interesting. For nobles to be like running that. Personally. I like it. Her head bowed. Fingers splayed across the stones. Micah sobbed, and she sobbed until... What? What's going on? A soft voice spoke from amongst the teeming shadows. Micah could not see the speaker. She could scarcely see at all, given the darkness and now her own tears, but she recognized its familiar cadences. The voice belonged to Henny, her darling Henny. Micah's dear friend was here too, in this stone cell which smelt of death, and though Micah feared for Henny, she felt relief too, bubbling up inside of her. She was not alone after all. Henny? Micah crawled forth on her hands and knees, being too exhausted to stand, and stared into the shadows. Henny, is that you? Micah? Henny replied after a pause, for the voice, though languorous, belonged to her quite unmistakably. There came a rustle from the darkness, of shifting cloth, perhaps a skirt, as Henny sat. A shaft of moonlight spilled through the singular barred window hewn into the high wall of their cell, and finally Micah was afforded a view of her maid. Though christened Henrique, is that right? Henrique, Micah had always called her beloved maid Henny. It seemed more appropriate appellation for so cheery a woman, so for Henny, come rain or shine, was rarely seen without a smile. Henny was not smiling now, however. She was sitting upon the wooden cot which Micah had first spied, during her brief examination of her surroundings. What she had taken, at first, for a crumpled blanket must have been the body of her own dear maid, obscured from her by the shifting shadows. Henny's face looked woefully weary, and it had lost much of its usual pinkness. Her apron, once white, now stained and sullied with dirt. Henny's shoes had been black and sensible, but now they were mired and filled, and her socks were rucked up about her ankles. Henny's eyes were wide, and displayed so much white her irises seemed lost in them. This lent her a startled look, like a small woodland animal, a look which was heightened further by her knotted and tangled tresses. Henny's hand, which she held at her front, clasped together, were trembling like those of a woman thrice her age. Henny looked an awful sight, but Micah knew she could hardly have been any better herself. Henny's hair might have been a mess, but at least she kept it short. There was not so very much of Henny's dark tresses to be worked into a state of disorder. Micah's own hair, meanwhile, was very long and curly, and though she had worn it in a chignon, she could now feel it straggling loosely about her shoulders. What's a chignon? Oh, it's like a bun. A fancy bun. It's pretty, though. The back of her neck prickled, either from the cold or from a dislodged hairpin or two. Perhaps that was why Henny stared at Micah so, once she had regained her own sense of equilibrium, as though she had seen a ghost. My God, Micah! Henny looked so alarmed, Micah felt almost ashamed. Micah was no stranger to shame. She felt it frequently. In fact, when she was with her mother, but it rarely raised its ugly head in Henny's presence. Since Micah's girlhood, Henny had been her one staunch, steadfast companion. She was the only person Micah knew who took Micah for who she was, rather than wishing, often aloud to her face, that she could be more appreciative, more amenable, more effusive, more like a lady and less like herself. Henny did not want Micah to be more. She only wanted Micah to be Micah. Did that mean, then, that Micah did not look like Micah in that moment? But who else did she resemble if not herself? What had happened to her? Are you all right, Micah? Oh, look at your poor face. Henny rose from the wooden cot, which creaked, and crouched before her friend. Reaching out, still shaking, she cupped Micah's cheeks in her fingers and said, "You're bleeding." I am? Yes, you have a nasty cut beneath your right eye and your cheek. Henny sucked in a breath, her expression grim. It's all banged up. You're positively black and blue. Oh, I, hadn't realized. I'm sorry, Henny. What? Henny, who had procured a handkerchief from her skirt pocket, it fortunately was devoid of dirt, paused in dabbing at Micah's face to look at Micah with bemusement. Why are you apologizing to me, you daft goose? You've done nothing to feel sorry for. I played a few of Abby Himi's games in the past, the writer of this game. Yes. It's amazing to see how much her writing improves. Ooh, I should take a look at some of the past games. I like the writing. It feels like reading a book, which I enjoy, honestly. I don't know. I'm just sorry for making you worry, I suppose. Think not of it. It's my job to worry about you. I'm your maid, remember? Well, of course I remembered that much. My thoughts might be in a state of disarray for the present, but I would never forget you. You are much more than my maid, Henny. You're my friend, too. My dearest friend. And I could very well say the same about you. That's why it hurts seeing you in such a frightful state. Do I look so very bad? Well, now. Henny cast her gaze over Micah's face, her brown eyes brightening with familiar mischief as she did. That depends on how honest you want me to be. Oh dear. Do I look as bad as all that? You've certainly looked better. Your face is as banged up as a windfall apple. She has a lot of other Yuri visual novels too, so that's a plus. Oh. An apple? Micah shook her head in wonderment. I only hope that the apple isn't ridden with worms. I don't think you've anything to worry about on that score, at least. Well, that is a relief. I suppose things could always be worse. Right you are. That's the spirit. You're still alive, and so am I, and we're together. That ought to count for something, although... Henny finished wiping the worst of the congealed blood and dirt from Micah's cheek, then drew back her soiled kerchief gripped tight in her hand. Her expression newly dour, she said after a moment's pause. I am afraid that your parents mayn't have been so fortunate. What? Micah's heart leapt in her chest at this somber announcement. What happened to them, Henny? Do you know what's going on? You don't? I recall that we were traveling to Augsburg to visit my fiancé, but as for how we came here... Fiancé? Micah closed her eyes in the hope of remembering something, but again, nothing came. Her mind remained stubbornly blank, as featureless as a snow-capped mountain, all flora blanketed in untrammeled whiteness. I am afraid I am drawing a blank. I cannot remember. Not a single thing? Nothing. I see. Henny grit her teeth together for a few minutes, her eyes dark. She seemed to be weighing up her words, as a baker might measure out flour and sugar before speaking. That's not such a surprise, I suppose. You hit your head pretty hard back there. It might be for the best that you can't remember all the gory details. I wish I could forget what happened myself, but... Henny's voice trailed away as awkwardly she gripped her kerchief. The kerchief had been the only clean thing in Micah and Henny's cell, but now it too was ruined, streaked with brown and red. How deep was the cut that Micah had sustained, and how much had she bled? This too remained a mystery. Micah did not know. There seemed to be much, all of a sudden, she was ignorant of. She felt so very unworldly that she might as well have been a little girl again, enthused after she had successfully stolen the key to her family's mausoleum. Micah had not known, as she stood in the chill entrance of the mausoleum, that she was about to lower herself into a subterranean world of death and decay, though part of her had wondered. Henny. Micah took Henny's hand in her own, her fingernails cracked, discolored, and dusted with dirt digging into her skin. What happened? Tell me, please. I want to know. Yes, I thought you might. That does make things a mite complicated, though. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. Just... Henny looked to Micah with half-lidded eyes, her expressions distressed, uncommonly pale and pinched. Promise you won't take against me for what I'm about to tell you. I've gone through a lot tonight already, and that would be the straw to break the camel's back. Henny, please. You should know that is a trivial concern. I am fully aware that none of this is your fault. You have only ever sought to protect me. I have no better friend than you, not in all the world. Ah, what a wholesome friendship. And it's precisely because I want to protect you that I don't want to go into all this. I know it will upset you. Christ. It upsets me too. It's an upsetting situation all around. It's rotten, really, what people are capable of, but... Henny, perhaps sensing her own distress, paused. She inhaled, then, in a calmer tone, she said, Just how much do you want to know, Micah? How much is there to know? Oh, I remember everything. I'll always remember tonight, I expect. It made quite the impression. Horrible things always do. Oh dear. Are things truly that dire? They're pretty bad, yes. Give me an abridged account then. I have no need to hear everything. Right you are. Henny bowed her head in acquiescence, her face half swallowed by the shadows. The band of light which had penetrated their drab cell had long since been extinguished. the moon obscured beneath the rolling rolling fog. It was so cold in their cell that Micah could not cease her shivers. Even her teeth felt cold, like shards of ice implanted into her gums. Hanny's proximity served as something of a comfort, but it could not rid Micah of her trepidation. She knew, once Henny had relayed the past events to her, her life would no longer be the same. Everything would change. It was changing already, in fact, so quickly that Micah hardly had a chance to gather her bearings. She felt lost, adrift, and hopelessly afraid. I'm sorry to tell you this, Micah, but during our travels, the carriage, it was attacked by bandits. What? No. Yes. They came creeping out of the fog like, I don't know, monsters from a children's story maybe, but much scarier. They waylaid the carriage, then stormed it. I think everyone's dead, yeah. They drew out their daggers and threatened your father. And when he refused to comply, well... Henny's expression twisted. They stabbed him. What? Micah drew in a sharp inhalation of air, her whole body tensing. She had expected as much before Henny began her gruesome tale, but the news still shook her. Evidently she had not been half so prepared to hear the worst as she had imagined. OMG Yuri, yeah. Hi Cam. Tragic Yuri, apparently, at the moment. Oh God, not my papa, my poor papa. Don't tell me he didn't... I'm sorry, but... Henny sniffled. No, Henny, don't cry. It's as you're probably suspecting. His wound was a deep one, and he died. Dead? My papa? Dead? Dead as a doornail, I'm afraid. Okay, we didn't need to go that specific, Henny. But okay. I didn't hang around to see what happened. But... It happened so quick, I don't think he suffered, at least. And my mama? What of her? Don't tell me she also... That was a bit much from Henny. Well, that's what I am saying. I know it's not like a uncommon, saying, but still, I wasn't expecting that. Henny did not reply, but the discomfort which crossed her face left Micah with no doubts as to her mother's fate. In one brief night, both Micah's parents had been slaughtered. Now she was an orphan. And what of us, Henny? How did we escape? I find it hard to believe the bandits would just let us go. Oh, I'm sure we would have joined your parents if we'd sat still like good little girls. But I didn't want to do that. But, well, he died. He's dead. Jeez. I took your hand while they were busy with your mother. How did mother suffer? I took your hand while they were busy with your mother, and we ran away. We fled through the woods, but the bandits took chase pretty darn quick. It was very dark, and the fog was thick, and I could hardly see what was happening. At one point you tripped and you fell. That's how you got that nasty cut on your poor forehead, and I was dragged down with you. We lay there on the ground in the dirt while the bandits tramped about looking for us. I figured we were both a couple of goners. I'd started to say my prayers to the Lord Almighty, but then... we survived. Yes, we survived. This, Micah supposed, was not such a surprise. It went without saying, really, that they had survived. Otherwise, they would not have been sitting in this ghastly cell speaking to one another. Either the bandits had spared them, which seemed unlikely, or somebody had come to their defense and then locked you up. Who would have been wandering the woods so very late at night, however? A vampire! Micah could hardly credit it. Their escape must have been the stuff that fantasies were made of. Do you know how we escaped, Henny? I know what my eyes saw, but if my eyes can be trusted or not, well, that's another matter altogether. I think I might have bumped my head myself. It was all so peculiar. At the time, it seemed like a miracle. But looking back on it, that ain't the right word. Miracles suggest God and all his angels, but there was not wholly about this. It was a right proper mess, really. A total bloodbath. But blood? Yes, there was blood, and lots of it. It's hard for me to explain, but alls I know is, one moment we were sprawled upon the dirt, you unconscious, I half out of my mind with fright as the bandits approached, and then the next, they were gone. Gone? But where? And how? Did they run away? Not necessarily. Not of their own free will, like. The fog parted, you see, and then this figure. This woman. She appeared so quick, it was like she'd sprung up from the earth. She wasn't very tall. I don't think she was, at least, and she was very skinny. But the way she looked, the way she moved, there was something unnatural about her. I didn't get a very good look at what happened next, but I saw her go after those bandits. I think there were at least 4 of them, but that woman soon took care of them. Save her, fam! Savior! Yeah! I want to see the vampire. There was so much blood and a lot of mud. It stunk to high heaven, it did. Brought tears to my eyes. That woman, though, the woman in white, she didn't seem fussed at all. She stood there once she had finished, beneath the moon, like nothing had happened. And then Henny pressed her fingers to her brow, and overwhelmed, shook her head. I don't remember naught after that. I think I must have fainted. When I finally woke up, I found myself here. It was your crying that woke me up. I've never been able to rest easy while you're in tears, Micah. Yes, I know. You've always been so good and so kind. Thank you, Henny. Henny, you can't faint in such a pivotal moment, SMH. That's what I'm saying. Micah chanced to smile, though the muscles about her mouth felt atrophied, worn away following the news of her parents' demise and her own near brush with the Reaper's scythe. Grimmy. I miss Grim. But date with the DLC soon, I think, so that should be exciting. I have no idea what I would do without you. It sounds like you saved me. From the bandits, I suppose I did. But I wasn't much use when you took that nasty spill. There's no way I would have been able to carry you to safety. Not when we were all turned about in the woods and I had no idea where we were. I think I scraped my own shin, too. My ankle aches. We'd have been goners if that woman hadn't appeared. But now that I'm talking about it, it doesn't sound real. I can't think of any woman who would be able to beat 4 men in a test of strength. Not even your own Mademoiselle Blanchard. Who is that? Her mother? Micah's smile widened at this. Despite the severity of their situation, she found, to her surprise, she was even able to laugh. It was a weak laugh which contained little in the way of mirth, but it was sincere. Henny never failed to cheer her up. She must have had a knack for it. Micah was too old to believe in magic, but when she was with Henny, she sometimes wondered, are you sure it was a woman who fended off those bandits? Perhaps it was some sort of animal instead, and you failed to perceive it in the fog. That doesn't explain how you ended up in the dungeon, girl. Come on, let's use our brains. Come on now. That could be it. Like I said, my mind's a mess. I feel like I've lost a good 10 years off of my life, although... Here, Henny smiled grimly, in the manner of all survivors after witnessing something horrid. Slay, girl boss. Yeah. That's better than having it cut short altogether. We must be thankful for the small mercies, yes, even if our lives were saved at my parents' expense. Micah squeezed her eyes shut. She could feel tears beating upon her lashes anew, but this time she was able to subdue them. The news of her parents' death was a heavy burden to bear, but for Micah, not having witnessed their final moments, found it hard to imagine. I wonder if she gets her memories back eventually. It still did not seem quite real, despite the rawness of Henny's account. The shock of it all perhaps had blunted her senses. It would take a while for her parents' passing to truly register. When it did, however, Micah did not doubt the tears would come, thicker and faster than before. It had not always been so, but her childhood misadventures in her family's crypt had left her something of a crybaby. Damn, what happened in the crypt? It was fortunate she had Henny by her side to dry her eyes. What would she have done without her trusty maid? Now then. Micah inhaled, her chest rising beneath her torn gown, and glanced about. Where do you suppose we are, and how do you suppose we got here? That's a good question. I've been wondering that too ever since we awoke. It's not the nicest of digs, is it? Not particularly, no. It's awfully draught, and it's damp too. I'm freezing. You poor thing, you. Come here. Henny shifted closer to Micah, then drew her arms about her, holding her close so as to protect her from the frigid air. Henny glanced about her, as did Micah. She squinted into the shadows, as though they might reveal more than they had upon her initial inspection, namely, the wooden cot and the chamber pot beside it. But to Micah's disappointment, she found the cell quite unchanged. It was every bit as sparse as she recalled. The shadows did little to mask this fact, and still it stank. Goodness me, it's not much to look at, is it? We might as well be in a prison cell. Really? I'm not going to be sarcastic. We're going to keep going. Okay. I think that might be what this is. Henny drew back from Micah, her legs crossed beneath her upon the stone floor, and frowned. I reckon you're right. I wonder who brought us here. You and me both. It was nice of our mysterious benefactor or benefactress to rescue us, though they can't be all that kind if they're going to let us suffer in here. You'd think they could have at least put us up in a nicer room. I'm not expecting first-class accommodations, but you deserve better than this, Micah. This place isn't fit for rats, let alone people. Rats? It's all right. It's better than being dead, at least, even if these lodgings are a mite uncomfortable. Only a mite? Well... Micah corrected herself with a smile. Quite a bit, if I'm being honest. Why was it in that font too? They know. They know. We're never safe. Micah drew her arms about her legs, her knees beneath her chin, and said, Ah yes, I saved you and now I shall put you in this cold, creepy cell. That's what I'm saying. Like, what happened? When I woke up, I was lying on the floor. On the floor? Henny's eyebrows shot up her forehead until they met her hairline. The gesture was so exaggerated it managed to bring another smile to Micah's lips, despite how very dire their situation was. I suppose it makes sense there being only one bed, but oh, that is too much. I can't believe they'd fling you about like a sack of sawdust. Many unbelievable things have happened tonight. Our benefactor must have been bucking the trend. Some benefactor. When I get my hands on them, I'll give them what for. Don't, honey. It wouldn't do to pick a fight with whomever brought us here. I wouldn't want to anger them, not when we are at their mercy. Why, but that makes us sound like captives. Is that not what we are? This is a cell after all, and we have no means of escaping. We're being treated as prisoners. I know, but it still stings. I don't care about me, but I don't want to see you being treated like a convict. Not when you've been through so much. That makes us sound like captives. Henny, I'm gonna hold your hand when I tell you this. You've been through worse. At least I don't remember what happened, unlike you. And you're the one who will be saddled with the consequences. Poor Micah. It was your parents, not mine, who were... Well... I don't suspect there's much point in trying to suss out who's suffering more than who. As it stands, we're both in this together. I won't abandon you, Micah, so try not to worry. Keep your chin up. We'll get through this. Thank you, honey. I almost believe it, coming from you. You should. I don't say things I don't mean, you know. Now let's see. Maybe things aren't as dire as they look. There could be a way to escape yet. Henny rose to her feet, though unsteadily, and did a circuit of the cell. The shadows made it seem larger than it was, for they obscured the walls, but it did not take Henny many steps to canvass the full length of the dingy room. She pressed her fingertips to the wall, then her ear, as though the stoneworks might whisper unto her their weaknesses, but her efforts were in vain. Oh my god, wrong button. The walls had held firm as did the steely slats with the crisscrossed entrance. Henny took the bars between her fingers and squeezed experimentally, but they refused to yield. Oh, come on. Frustrated now, Henny gave the bars a kick. The tip of her shoe collided with them, loosing clods of dirt from her soles, but... Damn it all! The bars, as before, did not budge. They were quite impermeable. Sighing, Henny soon changed tack. She moved from the door to glance up at the window, but this was similarly barred, too high up to reach, and much too small to squeeze through. It seemed like a miracle, almost. The window, being so mean, allowed any moonlight at all to spill into their cell when the clouds and fog had shifted. And? Micah asked when the disenchanted Henny flopped back down beside her with a rustle of her skirts. Did you uncover anything? Not foul, except that we're more trapped than I thought. I thought you might have come to that conclusion, yes. God. Henny kicked off her right shoe, then began to massage her feet, which had begun to throb. This is a rum situation. I wonder what we're to do. I don't think there is much we can do other than wait. I suppose you're right. I can't say I like the thought of that, though. We're sitting ducks here. I feel we ought to be taking some kind of action. Henny looked about the cell once more, then sighed. But I'm drawing a blank here. I can't think of anything we could do. I'm sorry for being so hopeless, Micah. I meant to look after you, but I'm at a total loss. Don't apologize, dear Henny. I feel better simply being with you. That's something, at least. I wish I could be of some real use, though. You are of real use. Without you, I'd be an unconscionable mess weeping on the floor. That was a hard word. Well, we can't be having that. It breaks my heart to see you cry. Henny's so sweet. What the heck? Much as it breaks mine to see you self-flagellate so over something that is not your fault. Their relationship is so sweet. I love friendship. Touché. Now that we're well and truly stuck here, I suppose we ought to make the best of it, although I have a bad feeling about this place. It gives me the creeps. I don't know who imprisoned us here or what cause, but they've no manners to speak of. Why, it's almost as if... Henny begun, but she found herself unable to finish the sentence. A sound issued forth from the darkness, emitting beyond their tightly sealed cell. Need someone like Henny in my life? Real and true. We all need a Henny in our life. Let's be real here. Henny's so sweet. What the heck? What the heck? Okay. It was a faint sound, like that of far-off rain, but Henny still heard it, the sour air being so still and quiet. It sounded like a scream. Good God! A scream? Henny sat up straighter, her fingers digging into her arches, her eyes alert. What in the world was that? I suppose that was just the wind. Do you really think so? Yes, I imagine. Micah answered in the affirmative, though deep down, OMG, is it time? Though deep down, both she and Henny knew the truth. That had not been the wind. It had been too raw, too pained, too, though faint, unmistakably human. There were other cells, or so it seemed, besides theirs, where others were incarcerated, others whom, right now, were being tortured by unknown hands. Micah could feel the fine hairs on the back of her neck standing up. Her body, which felt constrained by her stays, quivered. All she could do was sit there, her legs pressed to her chest like a fitful young girl, as she murmured more for her own benefit than Henny's. It was the wind, that's all it is. It's the wind. It's nothing to worry about. It's nothing, really. Everything will be fine. With no obvious way of escape and very little to do, Micah and Henny had no choice but to idle their time away. They sat upon the stone floor together. They could, Micah supposed, have sat upon the wooden cot, but it did not seem sturdy enough for both of them, with their legs folded primly like two little girls conducting a make-believe tea party. Me when I lie, not them being delulu. They're coping the best they can. Oh, my mom's home. I'm gonna go say hi. Oi, I'm back. Oi. Oi. Okay. If I cough or sneeze, thank you. Thank you for the welcome back. Don't worry. I'm just coughing. I don't know why. I'm not sick. I am not sick. I refuse to be sick. Okay. Henny had, at first, balked at the thought of her mistress sitting on the floor like a plebeian, but Micah's dress was already so dirty it scarce mattered. Pat, pat. Thank you. The two women did not, however, abandon themselves to inertia. I refuse to be sick, so real. Thank you. I know. Which is, well, it's funny I say that because I'm working on another ASMR script and you would not believe what the theme is. Anyways, who knows if it'll ever see light of day. I might just toss it in the trash and be like, nope, never again. Oh, she leaked. No, I'm still debating on whether I'm actually going to record it or not. I've been like staring at the script. I'm not leaking anything. It wasn't a secret, kind of, I guess. Oh. I'll see how I feel about it. I don't know. Okay, the hard thing is, right? I need to listen to what I recorded, but I can't. I can't listen to my own voice like that. I'll be like, I can't believe I said something like that, and then like throw my phone across the room, which is an issue, obviously, because I don't want to upload it without listening to it. So yeah, we'll see. I'll try my best. It'll probably come out. I was planning to release it as a let me listen to it for you then easy. You just want to listen to it. No, but I was planning to release it as like a celebration for 500, so it probably will come out. I'm just trying to figure out if I can make it any longer, because I think this one would also only be like 5 minutes. But this one feels a bit hard to stretch out, so maybe next time I'll choose a different subject or a different like idea. But anyways, the two women, cell, people died, vampire lady soon. Okay, going on. Henny knew they had to do something to take their minds off their ghastly predicament. Fortunately, Henny was not empty-handed. She had in her pocket, along with the kerchief she'd used to wipe Micah's cheek, a pack of cards. Yuri, yes. These cards were bent at the corners, but they remained perfectly functional. For want of a better way to use their time, Henny proposed to Micah a game of Joker, which she soon accepted. Henny cut the deck, then dealt out the cards, her motions deft despite her trembling. I would have just tried to sleep, not gonna lie. I think I'd still be tired, no? But okay. Both Henny and Micah were familiar with card games. They often played rounds to pass the hours, there being precious few amusements that the ladies of Micah's caliber were permitted to do. Were it not for Henny and her games, Micah feared she would have lost her mind from fright. The two women played several rounds of Joker, examining their decks and dispensing of cards. The game did not require a great degree of tactical thinking, but it did help alleviate some of Micah's concerns. It could not, alas, alleviate the cold, but Micah had been shivering for so long that she had almost grown accustomed to it. Real, just close your eyes and pretend nothing's wrong. Yeah, exactly. She had been in the dank, miserable cell for so long she could scarcely remember how it ever felt to be warm. Had her journey to Augsburg continued unimpeded, she would now be sitting by the fire in Walter Gerhardt's living room, or else tucked up in one of his many guest bedrooms with a warming pan at her feet. Both Augsburg and Walter seemed very far away to Micah now. I'm giving up on his last name, though being confined thus in a prison cell. How long had she been sitting with Henny on the floor shivering? Micah did not know. She could not tell. She had lost all conception of time in its passing. It had become nebulous to her, unformed and unfixed. All Micah really knew, in her infinite ignorance, was that the night seemed hopelessly long. She, hopelessly small and insignificant. There was no clock in Micah's cell, and neither she nor Henny carried timepieces upon them. The only means Micah had of tracking the advancement of the hour was the sliver of sky she could see beyond the narrow window, situated high above her head. She could recall that the sky had been dark upon her waking, and it remained so now, 3 games of Joker later. The moon, which had emerged from the fog at irregular intervals, shone its pallid light upon Micah's head and upon her hand of cards, lighting her Joker and his wide rictus grin. Micah had never much cared for the Joker in Henny's trusty pack of cards. His expression unnerved her. Every once in a while, as she played, Micah spared a few glances upwards at the barred window. She could not hope to guess at the hour, but she knew it was late. It had been late when the bandits had descended upon her parents, and it was still late now. Perhaps 1 hour had passed since the attack, or 2. It could have been an advanced hour of the night, or could have been, by the same token, the very, very early hours of the following morning. The calendar might have shifted already from one day to the next, but Micah was none the wiser. Micah could not believe, though, when she tilted her head, that the sun had any intention of soon putting in an appearance. The darkness which abounded within her cell was too complete for it, the cards in her hands almost inscrutable without the aid of the moon's light. Micah could not hear, either, the telltale twittering of birdsong which often announced the coming dawn. When did the birds begin to chirp among the boughs of the trees beyond her bedroom window? Micah could not recall, but she thought it must have been around 6 in the morning. Micah had gone to bed at 10 every night like a dutiful daughter, despite her advancing years, but she had also often found it hard to sleep for a full, unbroken 8 hours. Mood. She would arise at odd hours, at 1 or 2 or 3, her head full of thoughts, and often she found it hard to sleep again. When this occurred, Micah would rise from bed to sit by her windowsill, her forehead in the summer pressed to the glass. That always helped cool her, and her errant thoughts alongside it. Oh, how her mind raced! It seemed quite unfair, really, that she should be cursed with so many thoughts when her parents demanded only that she be a perfect, passive doll of a woman, with no opinions at all. With weary eyes, Micah would look out to her back garden, steeped in shadows and the cobblestone streets beyond it. Others might have found the night in its fathomless stillness uncomfortable, but Micah quite enjoyed it. At least she did not have to perform when all else were abed. She was free to feel and think as she wanted, without fear of being reproached. Micah, her mother had often scolded her as she sat in the dining room for her uncomfortable family meals. You are furrowing your brow again. Have I not warned you against it? It is most unattractive. What must air Gerhardt? Wish I had Micah's time awareness, not gonna lie. Low key, yeah, same. If he could see you now. Micah would always apologize for these faults of hers, no matter how slight, but inwardly she smoldered. She did not like being spoken down to as if she were a child. Now, at least, after the night's horrors, she needed no longer worry about furrowing her brow in an unbecoming way as she sipped her soup. She no longer had a mother to scold her. She would never see her mother nor her father again. And what of Walter? Of that Micah had no earthly idea. What if Walter sent the bandits, Loki? Oh, this is ridiculous, Henry groused while examining her own cards. We ought to be at Herr Gerard's right now. Gerhardt's right now, safe as houses. We weren't so very far from Augsburg. At least I don't think we were when we were attacked. Why did those bandits have to go after us? We were just unfortunate, I suppose. I can't imagine the bandits meant to specifically target us. We just happened to be there. You're probably right, but... Goodness. Of all the awful luck. At least you've had your fair run during our game. You've beaten me out soundly during every single hand. Huh, well, true. I suppose I should thank heaven for small mercies, eh? Henny smiled at Micah's attempt to cheer her, but it didn't last. Both Henny's smile and Micah's cheer were half-hearted, and soon they were swallowed by the sinister darkness of their cell. It's a shame I don't feel more thankful. I wonder what Herr Gerard would make of this. He'd be off his head, I'm sure, if he knew the state you're being kept in, Micah. I'm enraged too, for you and him. You deserve far better than this. You're a Von Essen, for crying out loud. The person who's holding us here will feel mighty sorry when they realize who you are. You're a real lady. Maybe. Micah's response was vague, in both tone and meaning. Not even Micah herself was sure whether she meant to disparage Henny's optimistic assertion that her status as a lowly lady would grant any favors with their captors, or whether she was a lady at all. That's true, Micah, you deserve a vampire girlfriend. I mean, what? Micah had been born to a noble family, it was true, with a lineage that could be traced back centuries, but the Von Essens were not what they had been. Half a century of poor financial decisions and a grandfather with a compulsive gambling addiction had led to the squandering of much of the Von Essens' wealth. While still in possession of their family home and a veritable fleet of maidservants, the family's finances had been in a dire state ever since Micah's girlhood. Though not openly wanting for cash, Micah's parents had made a good many purchases based on their family's prestige rather than the figures in their bank account. Micah's wedding to Herr Gerard had been an attempt to shore up the family's wealth before they could fall from grace altogether, but that now seemed an impossibility. How could Micah wed Walter when she was incarcerated? If Micah had loved Walter, she surely would have shed tears over so cruel a fate. As it was, however, she was curiously calm. Because you don't love him. That's okay, Micah. We understand. We know. What does she care how Walter felt? She barely knew him. Well, not to worry. Herr Gerard must be sitting in his drawing room now, wondering where the blazes we are. I have no idea what time it is. That, Micah thought glumly, made two of them. But we should have arrived in Augsburg ages ago. Herr Gerard is sure to send out a search party before long. He'll be worried sick about you, Micah. Would he, though? Also, how old is this man? How icky is this arranged marriage? I want to know. Do you really think so? Absolutely. I mean, he is your fiancé. He's got to be worried. Or maybe he sent the bandits. I don't know why I'm convinced he sent the bandits. I'm sorry. You're such a sweet thing. I don't see how he couldn't. Thank you, honey. I appreciate it. I mean, how many times did they meet, though? Don't thank me, Micah. I'm just stating the facts. If I was a man and I had a fiancé like you can bet I wouldn't let you out of my sight. Henny, Micah is not worried. What makes you think that man is worried? True. Perhaps it's a good thing I'm here with you then. You, at least, know I'm all right. Yes, you are, and I thank heaven on high for it. You know I'd do anything to keep you safe, Micah. I know. Micah could well believe that, coming from Henny. When it came to Henny's claims about Walter, however, Micah was less certain. What did she know about Walter, really, other than his age and his occupation and how fabulously excessively wealthy he was? Micah had met Walter on only 3 past occasions, and they'd exchanged almost as many words. The man was a stranger to her, and Micah's desire to marry him was inversely proportional with her parents' desire to see her walking down that aisle. Micah had been dreading her visit to Augsburg for well over a month. Now it had been terminated. She felt a perverse sort of relief. Okay, but he kind of looked hot. Loki, I think he's hot. Part of Micah had even begun to wonder, as she sat in her cell, whether the bandits' attack had brought with it some good alongside all the bad. But that, Micah chastised herself, was hopelessly cruel. Were her parents' lives truly worth that little to her? His flags might be red, but we're colorblind. It was true enough that she may never see Walter Gerard again, but she would never see her mother nor her father again either. It was not a fair trade, not by any stretch of imagination. How could she have ever thought of such a thing? It must, Micah thought grimly, be because I am a bad Be because I am a bad daughter. My mother was right. I am ungrateful. Ow! Perhaps this, then, is a punishment from God. I never appreciated them while they were alive, and now they are dead. How cruel and callous I am. Henny might have called Micah sweet, but Micah found this hard to believe. No, girl, your parents just gaslit you. A lifetime beneath her mother's iron, implacable rule had taught Micah how to be submissive, but it had not taught her sweetness. She smiled and simpered because it was expected of her, but late at night when she could not sleep, she seethed. Micah had resented her parents, and Walter alongside them for a long time. That Henny did not know this was perturbing. Henny must not have known Micah all that well after all. Henny is a knight in silver armor trapped inside a maid. True. We love Henny. Or perhaps, Micah thought, with a shiver, it was she who did not truly know herself. Micah and Henny sat in their cell for what could have been minutes or hours or even days whiling away the time. By God, there was so much time, with continued, unending, incessant games of Joker. Micah's heart was not in the game, her head being otherwise occupied, and Henny trounced her soundly, 12-1. Henny was better than Micah in card games in general, so this came as little surprise. Micah was accustomed to losing and accepted her failures with good grace. There were more important things in life than card games. And, in any event, Micah had never cared for the jokers in Henny's deck. She preferred to be rid of them. Little of note happened during these dead, empty hours. Nobody came to visit Henny and Micah in their cell, and the faint screams both women had heard, though Micah was staunchly determined to think of it as wind, did not seem to impinge upon their solitude. Girl, this is not the time to be having an existential crisis. You're a prisoner. That's true. That's true. There are bigger fish to fry right now. Come on now. The sky beyond their prison cell, meanwhile, remained dark, like a bereaved window outfitted in mourning clothes. The cold remained oppressive, the stone floor uncomfortable, and Micah found little in the way of relief no matter how much she shifted. Micah had just begun to wonder, in a detached way, as Henny launched into their 14th round of Joker, whether they would ever meet their rescuer. Perhaps whoever had hauled them from the forest had done so, not as an act of kindness, but as a means of prolonging their suffering. Maybe they meant to keep them locked in this cell alone until time itself slowed to a trickle and ceased, the squalid stone walls tumbling down about them to crush their emaciated corpus in the debris. But soon, shockingly soon, or so it seemed despite all of the interminable waiting, Micah found her hypothesis proved wrong. She could hear, above the sound of Henny shuffling the deck, a sound. Footsteps. The footsteps were soft enough at first that Micah wondered whether she had imagined them, but as the seconds elapsed they became louder still, until even Henny heard them. You guys, I think it's time. I think it's time. I think it's time. It's time. It's time. I think it's a time. It's a time. Goodness me. Henny fumbled with the cards and threw them down face up. Red hearts and black spades split across the stone. Can you hear that, Micah? Yes, I can. Somebody must be coming. Our rescuer from the woods, do you think? They could be our rescuer, yes, but maybe... Micah did not finish this thought. Her saliva felt too thick in her throat, like tar, and she shivered. She did not want to extinguish the hope which she could see flickering now in Henny's eyes. That would have been cruel. Henny's head swiveled to the grated iron door, excitable as a puppy and wide-eyed as she peered through the shadows. This is a turn for the better. I was beginning to worry they'd forgotten all about us. I can't wait to come face to face with them. I'll be sure to tell them exactly what I think about their so-called hospitality. You said that once before, Henny, and I wish you wouldn't. I don't want to anger them. Oh, stuff and nonsense. I'm sure it will be fine. If they wanted to harm us, they had plenty of chances to do it already, surely. That is true, but... Get the popcorn, yeah! The footsteps drew closer still, echoing about the stone walls, echoing too inside Micah's skull. The footsteps could represent only two things. They would mean salvation if they were lucky, but Micah found it difficult to believe this. Neither she nor Henny had been very lucky that night, despite Henny's continued winning hands in Joker. It seemed far more likely that these footsteps would bring about yet more suffering, and sure enough... Well... Oh my god, I keep clicking the wrong thing. This happened with Date with Death too, I'm so sorry. Well, would you look what the cat dragged in? The voice that cut through Micah's musings was a proud, haughty one, the syllables polished to perfection like cut glass. The voice belonged, quite obviously, to a woman, and given her pronunciation, she must have been well bred. Perhaps their rescuer, too, was a lady, a Von such and such, as Micah was, from a family whose ancestral home was vast and old and grand enough to have its very own dungeon. Whereas most nobility used their subterranean storage spaces for wine cellars, this family seemed to prefer taking prisoners. The thought did not fill Micah with much confidence about her mysterious rescuer. Anxiously, she glanced up to meet the source of the said voice, and when she did, oh! Micah could not help but gasp in surprise. Micah, this family is freaky like that. The owner of the voice, who now stood upon the opposite of the side of the cell's door, was not at all what Micah had imagined. Let us out of the cells. I want to see. She was shorter than Micah had expected. Shorter than Micah herself, who was dwarfed by her wealthier, significantly older fiancé, and slender with it, her cheekbones high, her neck not dissimilar to the stem of a flower. Milady, tips Flodora. Oh my god, she's gorgeous. Sorry, I'm staring. Hold on. Holy crap. I knew this would happen. Oh lord. Whew. Not the dog emojis. Her skin was frighteningly pale, like that of a corpse, and beneath her eyes, Micah could see dark rings similar to those she often sported during the long nights at her bedroom window, unable to sleep. The woman, or was she a girl, had hair so fair it was almost white. Do you need a moment by yourself? No, I'm okay. Had hair so fair it was almost white, which almost seemed to glow in the moon's light. Her hair was not worn, as most women did, in a chignon, but instead it was loose. It tumbled about her shoulders in waves, all disarrayed, in a manner which would have made Micah's mother swoon from the sheer impropriety of it all. These words, guys. I read a lot, but this is rough. The girl's appearance, but was she a girl, was striking, not only because of her indeterminable age, but because of her eyes, widely spaced and fringed with the most luxurious of lashes. Her irises were not brown like Henny's, nor blue like Micah's. They were not green, nor hazel, nor gray, nor any of the other shades Micah had seen in the faces of her family servants, and the attendants at the boutiques to which her mother took her in the congregation of her local parish. Her irises were, instead, a bright red, so much so they bordered on the visceral. These lovely irises were even redder than the blood which had seeped from Micah's sliced cheek, which had now congealed and seemed full of violence. That's not a girl, she's a woman, and a dangerous one too. We love to see it. The girl was a perfect stranger to Micah, but her eyes told more than pleasant chit-chat ever could. She was not normal. That's okay though. Micah knew instinctively as she gazed upon her that she should keep her distance, if she could. But this only made her, conversely, feel more enchanted. Hell yeah. She could not look away from her. It was as though her captor had placed her under a spell. Oh my god, I need to stop doing this. That woman. Henny shifted back, her skirts shifting against the ground. She's the one I told you about, Micah. The one from the woods. The spell is lesbianism. She's the one who fought off those bandits. I thought it was unbelievable what I saw, but now I know it wasn't a dream. She really is real. She killed all those men. She's a monster. A monster? Micah murmured on this under her breath, her expression one of perplexity. Had Henny delivered this indictment against any other, Micah would have thought her guilty of exaggeration, but she could believe such a claim easily when leveled at this woman. She killed all those men. Hot. She got rid of the trash. We should be thanking her. The woman did not look as monsters did in fairy tales, with slobbering maws and sharpened claws, but her red eyes make Micah's blood run cold regardless. She was no ordinary woman, but perhaps that was to be expected. Nothing about this night's event had been ordinary. Oh, a monster, am I? The woman's unnatural eyes narrowed, and with a smile said, "You cut me too quick, you humans do. At least you would, were I not so accustomed to it." No! Perhaps I bring it upon myself, given the unusual manner in which I treat my guests, but you could at least try to be polite. Why, if it were not for me, the both of you would be lying in the woods right now, mangled beyond all recognition. The fake pout. So you really were the one who saved us. I thought as much. Yours isn't a face anybody could forget in a hurry. No, she didn't mean it. She's just scared, please. Why, thank you. I will take that as a compliment. I am very striking, I know. Why did you save us, though? And how? I can't believe you brought us back here, wherever here is, on your own. You must have had help. Oh, if only. But alas, I have not had any help for... Well, let's see. It must have been a century at least. A century? Henny gawked at the woman, her eyes agog. But that would make you older than my grandmother. That can't be right. You don't look a day over 18. What a woman! Ah! I want to get out of this cell, and I want to be next to her. Oh, do you really think so? You're too kind. Laughing softly, the woman extricated a key from her pocket, then inserted it into the awaiting keyhole. My prayers were answered. Deftly she turned it, and deftly she stepped into the cell, the hem of her dark cape dragging against the uneven stone floor. Once inside the cell, she turned to pull the door open and locked it anew. There. That ought to do it. It would be horribly tedious if you tried to run from me. I would be able to catch you, of course, but I'd rather not bother with all the fuss. It's such a hassle. Oh, her eyelashes are gorgeous, what the heck. With the door thusly secured, she placed the key inside her pocket and turned to look at her prisoners, for that, Micah knew, with a sinking feeling, was what she was. Micah had been aware of her status upon waking in her dank prison cell, but the presence of the woman, and how very aloof she was, made this abundantly clear. She had not been brought back to this woman's abode as an equal. She was at this woman's mercy, von Essen or no, and Micah feared her family's prestigious title would have little sway here. The woman did not seem like one who cared for such things. She did not seem like one who cared for much of anything, really, or even about anything. Her lips might have been curved into a coy smile, like one who had been dealt a particularly good hand in a card game, but her red eyes were hard and horribly empty. Micah could tell— We can fix her. I can fix her. It's okay. Micah could tell on an instinctual level that this woman was not one to be trifled with. Why, she might not have been a woman at all. Now, why are you looking at me like that? The woman, catching Micah's cowed expression, pouted. You're making me feel quite unwelcome. I thought you would be relieved to see my face after being left to languish in the catacombs of my castle for hours on end. But maybe I was hoping for too much. In any case, you shouldn't frown like that, dear. It's an awful waste. You'll wrinkle your pretty face. This chastisement was familiar to Micah. She had heard it many times from her mother. While Micah had been trained to obey her mother without question, however, it was not so with this strange woman. Some of her reticence fell away and needled. Micah said, What I do with my face is my own concern. I'm sure it's none of your business. My. She thinks she's pretty too. You think I'm pretty? The mysterious woman tittered. You're feistier than you look. I took you for a shrinking violet, but maybe I was mistaken. You might make for quite the amusing plaything, though you'd be a good sight prettier if you smiled. I can't say I blame you for being so surly, though. I never liked smiling on command either, though it's been many, many, many years since anybody last tried to give me orders. It's fortunate nobody can tell me what to do now, at least. It came at quite a price, but... Oh well, never mind. Where are my manners? My name is Magdalena, but you may call me Lena. My family's name, meanwhile, is of no particular importance. They might have commanded some respect back in the day, but is not so now. They have long since been obliterated. I doubt history would remember them. It would not wish to. I am all that is left of their legacy, a fact I would very much love to rub in their faces, but alas, I never got the chance. It is very nice to meet you for the second time this night. So saying, Magdalena dropped into a neat curtsy, taking hold of her cape in lieu of a skirt. But I am afraid I will not be afforded much of a chance to properly know you. While I would relish the chance to speak with a couple young maidens such as yourselves, I have designs for you beyond idle chatter. And what do you mean by that exactly? Only that now I have brought you here, I cannot continue to let you live. You have already seen too much. What? Damn, she was the black sheep of her family. I want to know her backstory. Henny stared at Magdalena with wide eyes so full of fear that air swelled with it. What do you mean? What I said. Do try to keep up. It's awfully tedious having to explain myself down to the finer details. But I suppose you have the right to know the bare minimum, prisoners though you may be. I would hate to keep you in suspense, and at this point it matters not how much you know. You will not be able to tell anybody else what you might learn here. You'll not be venturing forth beyond the walls of my castle ever again. Magdalena smiled, her lips lifting in a wicked grin not so very unlike that of the Joker in Henny's pack of cards. Though Magdalena's face was white, her lips were red, much like her eyes. They stood out in her milky face like a rose, blooming despite the winter's chill. Or else, Micah thought with a shudder, freshly spilt blood. You must understand that I am not a normal woman. No human can hope to best me when it comes to a competition of sheer strength, as the bandits who were discovering you soon discovered. It did not take me more than a few seconds to dispatch them. The fight they put up was so pathetic it makes me wonder why they even bothered. If they'd any respect for my time, they would have slit their own throats with their daggers and saved me the trouble. It was nice seeing her even for the moment. You humans can be awfully thoughtless. But if they had done that, I wouldn't have been able to bring the little leader of their little group back to my castle. He was in a bad way, and I obliged to introduce myself to him before bestowing upon your similar and I was obliged to introduce myself to him before bestowing upon you similar honors. I really must apologize for making you wait. Magdalena dropped in another curtsy, as an elegant lady might, but it smacked of insincerity. There was no respect in Magdalena's red irises for her pair of prisoners. Rather than sympathize with their plight, she, instead, seemed a little more than amused. How many men and women had Magdalena brought to her castle, and how many had she similarly tortured? Micah knew of at least one besides her and Henny. The bandits' leader. Did you kill him? Eventually, yes. It was quite the sight. You ought to have seen the way he begged and pleaded and groveled at my feet. A grown man like that who was practically made of muscle. Oh, how fickle fortune is. Just 1 hour hence he was the predator stalking his prey through the woods alongside his lackeys, and the next... Magdalena drew her hand across her neck in an unequivocal, universal gesture of a slit throat. Well, what goes around comes around. He got what he deserved, and his screams really were exquisite. Did you perchance happen to hear them? He was being rather loud. Henny gave a violent start at this, but said nothing sensible. Her mouth fell open, but only syllables came out, all broken up and interspaced. What? Oh goodness. Surprised, are you? You shouldn't be. That man was a bandit, a vulture in a man's flesh who profited on misery. If it weren't for me, you would have gone the same way as the poor unfortunates in that stalled carriage. The driver and the horses, too. He even killed the horses? For what? Nobody was spared in their ravages, man nor beast. They made quite the grisly mess. Were I a century younger, it would have been enough to turn even my stomach. Maybe that is so, but to go over another death like that... It doesn't seem right. You're twisted. If I am twisted, that is only because this world... Magdalena began, but then paused. A momentary furrow captured her white, smooth brow, but soon it straightened out, as though nothing of note had occurred. Well, never mind that. I do not wish to spout cliches about good and evil. I would begin to bore myself. The fact of the matter is that man got what he deserved, as did his compatriots. I took great pains to ensure that. I paid that brigand back twofold for what he did to you. But you said you were going to kill us anyways. Did you know that he tried to be stoic in the beginning? Humans often are, human males in particular. They have so much pride. It's funny, really, that a cur like that would care so very much about appearances. He was less a man than he was a dog, but he still had pretensions of greatness, or of grandeur. I soon stripped him of these lofty delusions, however. Humans are very alike in one regard, at least. You all scream the same after your bones have been broken, and you all bleed red. That man was a brigand, I admit, who deserved the hangman's noose, but that's for a court of law to decide, not you. What you did isn't justice, it's barbaric. You shouldn't be taking pleasure in other people's deaths. What gave you the right to kill him anyway? I had every right to kill him. He was trespassing upon my land, as were you and the young lady here. His life was already at forfeit the moment he encroached upon my territory. The Lord's Prayer may say that we ought to forgive those who wrong us, but I have no patience with such teachings. They do not apply to me. The Lord has forsaken me. I am no longer a member of his congregation. I want to know her history. He would have no love for me as I am now, and I have little love for him. I cannot conceive how he could have let me suffer if he truly existed. Sometimes I do wonder. So you mean to add blasphemy to your list of crimes? Oh, I've done far worse than that in my time. The morals of you good sententious churchgoers do not apply to me. I am not of your kind. I am a drinker of blood who walks the night. I have been alive for over a century, though my life is very different to yours and your mistress's. I doubt that you could understand me, and neither do I want you to. I have no desire to understand you either. There would be no point. Do you think she turns us into a vampire? We are much too different. A drinker of blood? But that would make you a vampire? It was Micah who offered forth this labor, and after Hani's voice faltered. Micah was an ardent devourer of books, and she had read before of such shadowy denizens of night, much to her mother's chagrin. Lady Von Essen had thought Micah, as a well-bred young woman, ought not to read at all. It will only excite your mind, dear, but should instead busy herself with embroidery. Okay, her parents sound suffocating. Micah however, had always preferred books to busy work, particularly work which involved needles, and she had found herself returning to stories time and time again whenever she needed a break from her own dreary life. Micah had read all manners of books over the years, but she preferred adventure stories full of mystery, intrigue, and yes, even murder. Them thinking of Lena being a vampire now and not when she told them she was centuries years old. I guess so. They probably thought she was lying. But also, like, her ears and fangs are not very well hidden. I guess we can blame it on it being dark. That's okay. We won't reason things out. Micah knew from her reading that vampires were nocturnal creatures, often aristocratic, who shunned the sunlight, dwelt in ruinous castles, and supped upon the lifeblood of fair maidens. Yes, Micah thought, in an oddly detached manner. That did make sense. She had sensed there was something strange about Magdalena when first their eyes had met. Micah's blue and Magdalena's shocking scarlet. Magdalena really must have been a vampire. It all made sense. At least it would have, had Micah been a heroine in one of her novels. But life, Micah reminded herself, was not akin to a story. Micah might have consumed books like a starving man, but she had sense enough to know that the words written within the pages of adventure stories were all kinds of fiction. Vampires ought to have remained within the realms of make-believe. They had no business walking about as humans did, made of cold, unfeeling flesh with hearts which no longer beat. They were supposed to be constructs, mere figments of fancy, but Magdalena was real, undoubtedly so. Unless, Micah thought, striking her head had addled her. And, unsettling though she was, Micah did not take her for a liar. Yes, she's standing right in front of you. She's real. Her confession had sounded quite sincere. Yes, that is correct. I am a vampire, and this castle is my territory. That and the woods that surround you. You wandered into my domain, you hopeless little lambs, while on the run from those awful bandits. I know none of this is your fault, and I have no quibbles with you. I am not blaming you for what occurred tonight. There. See how fair I am? I am too nice by half, too nice for my own good cause. You have been awfully surly with me, the both of you, but I've only ever been polite. I would even let you go if I could. Dispatching of brigands is one thing, but I take no pleasure in harming young ladies. But I fear that would be foolhardy. I cannot allow any who have wandered into my realm to leave alive. I do not want you telling tall tales. Just keep us here. I should snap both your necks and be done with it, but... Magdalena's red eyes found Micah's, then held them. Her smile, which hitherto had seemed so easy, faded, and once more her brow furrowed. You don't seem to be a mere peasant. Magdalena delivered this judgment softly, but something dark seemed to throb beneath her words, something sinister. I can tell from your clothes, dirty though they are, that you are from a wealthy background. Your voice and your bearing. Yes, even the way you look at me. It all suggests that you are, in fact, a lady. Would I be correct in that assessment? Why would you ask? It would be problematic for me if I were to dispatch a woman of renown. I would not want your disappearance to catch the attention of men in high places. If they were to send out a search party into these woods, it is not wholly impossible that they would stumble upon my home. I have lived out of the sight of public eye for nigh on a century, and I have no desire to invite half of Augsburg's constabulary into my home. The idea is incredibly unpleasant. Magdalena pulled a face, as a small child might when confronted with a plate of food they did not care much for. If you really are a lady, I might do well to exercise some caution. I suppose I can always spare your life and kill only this dowdy common girl. Your maid, I take it? Magdalena looked to Henny now, her lips curled into a mean smile. What do you say to that? It is not a bad trade, is it? Her life for yours? Precious few people who find themselves in my abode are ever able to live to tell the tale. You would be one in? Goodness, how many guests have I had over the years? There must be a good 200 or 300. Aren't you touched by my thoughtfulness? Silence descended in the decrepit cell following Magdalena's announcement. Stuck for words, Micah could only stare at her, her lips parted. What was she to say to Magdalena's proposal? How was she to feel? There was relief, certainly, at the prospect of escaping the cell, but Micah could take no real pleasure in it, not when it would come at the cost of Henny's life. How could she abandon her friend, who had been by her side since early childhood? Were it not for Henny, Micah would be dead already, butchered like a fine-mirrored animal in her parents' carriage. Henny had rescued her once already from a bandit's blade. It seemed unconscionable that she should leave her now. Micah turned this over in her mouth, worrying her teeth with her lower lip. Then, well, if my life's all that you're after. Henny, no! Henny reached out, taking Micah's hand between her own, and said, What else is there to think about? It sounds like a fine suggestion to me. Don't you agree, Micah? What? Micah scared. Micah stared into Henny's round, soft face, her eyes vast and uncomprehending. Surely you don't mean that. You're not alright with this, are you, honey? Well, it'd be a lie if I said I was jumping up and down for joy at the prospect of being eaten by a vampire. Henny's smile wavered, though she tried to maintain a brave face. But if that's what I've got to do to save your life, Micah, then I'll do it. I do love you after all. I'm not going to let you get hurt. If Henny dies, I'm closing the game. Henny tried to sound brave, but Micah could hear how her voice trembled all the same. Could feel, too, how Henny's hands shook. Henny, like her, had heard the screams of the bandits' leader as they echoed through the halls. Though neither woman had seen his final moments, they knew from his cries that his demise must have been barbarous. Too much angst, that's what I'm saying. Goddamn. We just started. Micah could not allow Henny to endure such suffering for her sake. She could not allow her to die. Micah knew Henny only wished only the best for her, but no. Micah spoke up, her voice surprisingly cool given the wild fluctuations of her heart within her breast. I won't allow that to happen. It wouldn't be right. If one of us must remain here, then it ought to be me. What? No. You can't mean that, Micah. Surely you jest. No, I'm not. You know I have a terrible sense of humor, Henny. I hardly ever tell jokes. I don't have enough levity in me for them. I'm being very serious. You've always looked out for me, ever since I was small. Not that I always listened to you. Don't you remember when I stole the keys to the mausoleum in my insufferable curiosity and crept inside? But of course I remember. You dragged me in after you despite my warnings, and it went about as badly as expected too. Didn't it just? Faintly Micah smiled, dire though their situation was, happy to share this memory, though it wasn't at all fond, with Henny. For all she knew, it might very well have been her last chance to reminisce with her maid like this. Micah knew not what the future held, but Lady Von Esten was in such an awful mood when she found out. It was quite frightening. I'd never seen anything like it. Oh yes, she was fearfully cross. It's a wonder fire didn't come out of her nostrils. I recall that she struck you, and then when I tried to argue on your behalf, she struck me too. I hate her mother more and more. She struck me so hard my ears still ring from it sometimes. God, yes, poor hen. I felt awful about it at the time. Really, I did. I didn't care much about my punishment. God knows I deserved it. But you'd done nothing wrong. You'd been perfectly reasonable about the whole thing. If I'd listened to you, we could have avoided the furor altogether. But I was too reckless. I ignored your wishes, but you still tried to protect me. You jumped to my defense just like a knight, and you were slapped silly for your troubles. It was horribly unfair. I've dragged you into all sorts of messes before, Henny, and you've always come to my defense. You've been a wonderful friend to me throughout the years, but I can't keep relying on you. I'm less and less sorry about her mother dying so they could escape. Low-key, same. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. But Micah, I like it when you rely on me. Please feel free to take advantage. That's what I'm here for. No, I can't. It isn't right. It's long past time that I repaid you. The world is too good for Henny. By offering yourself up as a sacrifice in my stead? That isn't what I want. Micah, please. Henny stared at her mistress, her expression entreating. I love you, but you're acting like a crazy woman. And you are the pinnacle of rationality. Are you considering this crazy deal? That is truly insane. Don't tell me you've accepted all of this. Of course I've not accepted it. I'm terrified, really. See how my poor hands are shaking? But one of us biting it has to be better than both of us. If I can protect you, then I must. I will. That is my job. No, it isn't. Not any longer. I'm absolving you of your duty, Henny. This farce has lasted long enough. What farce? You know what I mean. Magdalena? Yes. Magdalena looked between the two women, a coy smile playing about her lips. Have you quite finished with your little quarrel? I must confess I was beginning to feel rather left out. My apologies. I will endeavor not to be so rude in the future to my hostess. Micah dipped her head in a gesture of esteem, one not so very dissimilar in the way the Henny was bidden to bob around her mother. Micah knew she could not afford to anger Magdalena. If Micah was to save Henny, she would be obliged to beg and bow and scrape. Fortunately, begging and bowing were not beyond Micah's means, even though she was a lady. She was no stranger to scraping either, having tearfully entreated her parents to reconsider her marriage proposal. She had failed on that score, but she did not intend to fail now. She knew what she must say. It seemed a stretch that Magdalena would believe her, but if she did... I fear you are laboring under a misapprehension, Lady Magdalena. Your reasoning is sound. There would indeed be a ruckus if a noblewoman was to go missing, but your application is not. I am not a lady, you see, but my companion is. Oh? Magdalena raised an eyebrow. Then you mean to say that you are the maid and this lumpen Henny here is the mistress? That is correct, yes. I know I am dressed as a lady, albeit a disgraced one, but that was part of Lord and Lady von Essen's ruse. While traveling, they often have me dressed as a lady while Henny, that is to say Henrique, dresses as a maid. It is a means of subterfuge so that if our carriage were to be attacked by bandits, I am the one who would be in harm's way rather than my mistress. Only a truly desperate bandit would rummage through the pockets of a maid, especially when she is with her lady. What? Micah, that's... Henny began, but Micah cut her off. She was warming to her ruse, despite the chill which infused the air, and she found she could not still her tongue, not until she had delivered her whole address. Lady Henrique is the one whom will be missed in Augsburg, not I. She has a fiancé waiting for her, you know, and he is a very important man. If she doesn't arrive before the dawning of the next day, he will be certain to send out a search party for her. You would not want that, would you? Magdalena pondered Micah's tall tale for a few minutes, one glove resting upon her hip. As she thought, Micah stared at her, compelling her through sheer force of will to accept her tale at face value. It was patently unbelievable. Of this Micah knew. But she need not convince the whole jury. She only needed to convince Magdalena. An age seemed to pass during which nobody spoke until... Oh, very well. If that is how it is, then I suppose I have no choice. You may leave my abode, Lady Henrique. Here, Magdalena dropped another effusive curtsy, if that is indeed your real name. I will grant you the chance to reunite with your fiancé in Augsburg, who must be awaiting you with no shortage of anticipation. Who wouldn't, after all, wish to dote upon a maiden as fair and fine as yourself? Your surprisingly well-spoken maid, however, will be bidden to remain by my side. Do we have a deal? Yes, I would do anything to ensure Lady Henrique's safety. Oh, most assuredly. You would not consent to acting as a decoy on her behalf if you didn't care. What a wonderful friendship you women have. It is quite special, really, particularly given the disparity in your social statuses. Now come along, Lady Henrique. It was very lovely to make your acquaintance, but now I fear I must cut our meeting short. Let me escort you to the front door. It's the least I can do for a woman of your lofty status. What? Micah, no! Henry cried, but in vain. Magdalena was soon upon her, her pale fingers winding tight about her wrist. Micah, please stop this. Tell her the truth. I'm sorry, Hen, but... Abashed, Micah dropped her gaze to the stone floor. Though she had given her life for Henny's sake, she found she could not meet her friend's gaze as she was dragged bodily from the prison cell they had both inhabited. The hurt in Henny's countenance and the betrayal stung far too much. This is how it has to be. Says who? I was willing to go along with this woman's plan, but you scuppered it up. I don't understand you at all, Micah. Why would you tell such a tissue of lies for little old me? Magdalena, please. Henny stared at Magdalena, all while trying and failing to dig her heels into the stone floor of her cell. Surely you can't believe my mistress. It's obvious she's lying. There's no way she isn't a lady, not with her fancy proper way of talking. She's far, far more genteel than I could ever dream of being. Henny, don't cry. Her manners are certainly more polished than your own, yes, but perhaps this comes from years of servitude. You could stand to learn a thing or two from your maid, Lady Henrique. Your fiancé won't think much of you as you are now, I'm afraid. Why, you're speaking almost like a fishwife. Now come along, let us not argue. You will give me a headache. But Micah, I can't leave her. Let me go. Henny cried anew, now squirming, but Magdalena's hold upon her did not loosen. If anything, it seemed to grow stronger to such a degree that Henny screamed. Ow! No, I'm good. My mom was just asking me something. Henny's cry echoed through the cell, more unbearable than those of the bandit leader during his final moments. Magdalena had not made Henny bleed, at least, but she was gripping her wrist so tightly Micah feared she might snap it. Magdalena had strength enough, or so Micah had been left to believe, to best even a fully grown man. Henny, who was short and dumpy, could put up little in the way of a fight. The poor maid was quite helpless before her. There was nothing which could be done, not any longer. Henny would have to leave, while Micah would remain incarcerated in this dreary cell alone. This was what Micah had wanted, when she had found her frankly untenable story. So why, then, did she feel so guilty? Let go of me. Let go, I say. Micah, please. Henny continued to protest, but Magdalena remained insensible to her cries. The door of the cell was closed anew with a metallic thud, and then Micah was left, sitting upon the ground as she had been 1 hour hence when she had woken up, pale-faced and trembling and all alone. Damn. The time passed at an agonizingly slow pace as Micah sat on the stone floor of her cell with her legs demurely crossed. Demurely? Demure? Mindful? Without Henny to cheer her, the air felt colder than it had before, the shadows darker. Magdalena had taken Henny from the cell so abruptly she had not been afforded the chance to collect her scattered playing cards. Now, these cards were strewn upon the floor, upturned, red diamonds, red as Magdalena's eyes, and coal-black clubs. Micah caught the eyes of a nearby joker, his lips pulled into a garish smile, and shivered. Paranoid though she knew it was, it felt as though the card was mocking her. Micah reached out, fingers trembling to grab the card, then flipped it over. She did not want to look at the joker's grinning face. She did not want to think, either, about what Henny was doing or how she was feeling, and she certainly did not want to think of her own future. It would be easier to drive such musings from her mind, and yet, though Micah tried to keep her thoughts placid, like the smooth surface of an untroubled lake, sinister queries, sharp-toothed like eels, writhed just beneath the surface. What would happen when Magdalena returned? Did she mean to kill Micah quickly, or would she make her suffer first? Magdalena seemed to derive great pleasure from her torture of the bandits' leader, but she had said she did not care to harm young ladies. Had she meant it? Micah could only hope if Magdalena did mean to kill her, she would do so quickly. She had suffered enough for one night. No, for one lifetime. Micah, despite her heroism, did not want to die, The thought terrified her. When she imagined how Magdalena might kill her, a blade to her throat perhaps, poison, drowning, strangulation, she felt her skin icy cold now, rippled with goose flesh. She did not want to be stabbed or poisoned or drowned or choked. She wanted to live. Micah had read stories of knights and their exploits, but she was no chivalrous sir herself. She was a young woman, though not, as her mother might have reminded her, so very young anymore, and she had little experience of the world beyond her parents' home. From an early age, Micah had been taught to hold her tongue, to hold her thoughts, to be sweet and pretty and patient, and above all else, pliant. She was not supposed to think for herself, let alone stand up for herself. It wasn't appropriate conduct for a lady. Micah had endured 25 years as such, living only to please her parents and her parents' esteemed visitors, and later her parents' chosen fiancé, but it had not felt like living. The only times Micah felt herself was when she played cards with Henny or read her books, or sat by her window at night and stared out into the garden. Micah was 25, almost 26, but she knew nothing of the world. She knew nothing of freedom. She had never truly lived. How then was she supposed to die? She could not pass on, surely, until she had at least been afforded the chance to visit some of the places she had read about in her stories. Such dreams had been all which had kept Micah going through her dreary days kept indoors. She had persevered, not for the sake of her present, which she had lamented, but the hopes of a better future which waited, she had always been sure, beyond the horizon. Now, Micah feared she would never be able to reach that future. Her life was to be curtailed before it truly began. She would never see any of the world now. Paris and Venice and Rome would remain a mystery to her, exotic settings for stories and nothing more. She had been born trapped, and she would die thus. The only difference was, it was no longer her parents entrapping her, but a monster. It was a pitiful way to bring her life to its denouement. Had her 25 years thus far been a story, Micah thought bitterly, it would have been a hopelessly dull one, full of endless waiting, but precious little doing. Waiting to live, waiting to die. Was there any difference between these two states really, when all was said and done? There's no point in crying about it. Micah muttered this under her breath, in the dark, for her own peace of mind. There's no guarantee I would have been allowed to live, even if Magdalena did set me free. I would have to return to Herr Gerard, and we would wed, and then I would spend the rest of my days trapped in his house. I would go from being a cloistered daughter to a cosseted wife. Is that any better, really? It would be, Micah mused, nothing but another form of imprisonment. Walter had the money to travel anywhere, but whether he would be willing to expend these funds on little Johnsforth's housebound, bored wife was doubtful. Perhaps it was better this way. Micah had no life, she knew, waiting for her beyond the walls of Magdalena's castle. She had never been allowed to live as she wanted. That being the case, she might as well die. Damn. She had nothing left to lose. There was no sense in being sad. Not really, but... Micah wiped her eyes with the back of her right arm and felt an alarming dampness against her skin. She had not expected that, but perhaps she ought to. Her heart felt like it was breaking. Why am I crying? Micah brought her knees beneath her chin once more, drawing her arms about her legs, tried to curb her tears. The minutes continued to pass by, each more intolerable than the one which had preceded it, until at last Micah was alerted by the sound of footsteps. The iron door, which partitioned the cell from the hall, opened with a scraping squeal, and once more Magdalena entered Micah's. We're getting the Beauty and Beast trope. Yes, that's what I was thinking too, honestly. Except it's two women kissing, and I am here to see it. Though Magdalena had left with an unwilling Henny in tow, she was now alone. Except the beast is a beauty too. Yes. Henny had gone. Well, well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes? How fares you, my dear captive? I do apologize for the wait. Oh, never mind about me. What about Henny? Did you set her free? Goodness me, your loyalty towards your lady is most profound. I was certain you would be inquiring as to your own fate, but no. You seem only to care for her. You really ought to worry about yourself more, given the circumstances. But I shall endeavor to allay your worries. I did indeed set your mistress free. I escorted her to the entrance of my home, then bid her on her merry way. Now, why do you ask? Do you not trust me? You've done little to deserve it, given the way you've treated Henny and I. But, oh, I'm so glad to hear it. I only hope that Henny will be all right on her own. That remains to be seen. I set her free, yes, but there will be no guarantee that she will be able to find her way to Augsburg, not in the dark with all this fog. These woods are dense, and the paths are not clearly signposted. It would come as no surprise if she were to find herself lost, or else at the mercy of wild animals. This forest is fair teeming with wolves. Did you know that? Wolves? Oh yes, this forest is just as much their territory as it is mine, and they often come out at night to hunt. Bandits aren't the only thing fair ladies have to watch out for. But if your lady friend is resourceful and luck is on her side, she should emerge from this trial unscathed. Let us hope that she'll be all right, shall we? Micah said nothing to this, but instead dropped her gaze, her irises fixed upon her knees. Her mind turned, not to her own indeterminate faith, but to Henny, who would now be staggering through the woods, wreathed in an ephemeral fog. How far away was Augsburg? Micah did not know. She had lost all sense, not only of time, but of space. The world seemed to have shrunk until it encompassed not but her and her cell. Being imprisoned in Magdalena's abode would spell certain death, as it had for the leader of the bandits, but Henny was not yet out of the woods, literally and metaphorically. She could still meet with disaster during her attempted escape. Micah saw Henny backed against a copse of trees, their branches slender and sinister as a pack of hungry wolves bore down upon her, their eyes glistening madly in the moonlight. Why is this so, scary? But this was only one possibility. Magdalena had said Henny would need luck on her side, and Henny had that in abundance if her performance in Joker was anything to be believed. She had always been better at cards than Micah. Now, enough about Lady Henrique. She is no longer my captive, and as such is of little interest to me. I would far rather speak to you. To me? Yes, indeed. I've designs on you, my loyal little serving girl. She called us her little serving girl. I do hope you'll make yourself useful during your stay. Design? Then you mean... Micah pressed her fingers to the base of her throat. She could feel her pulse beating beneath the surface of her cool skin, as erratic as the rabbits caught in a snare. Do you wish to drain me of my blood? Do you want me to drain you of your blood? Magdalena tittered. How very eager you are. It is not that, do not misunderstand. I wish only, if you mean to kill me, that you would do so quickly. I've grown sick of waiting. Oh yes, that look in your eyes is delectable. It may be so, more so even than your blood. You're so very defiant, but what is this I spy? You appear to be shaking, my poor little Micah. That is because of the cold, and not because of your fright. I was able to protect my dear friend. I have nothing to be afraid of now. Then, you care nothing for your own life? I've never been afforded a life. You may take it if you wish. You wouldn't be the only one. Ah, yes. That is the fate, or so I have heard, of being a servant, you poor dear. Magdalena's red eyes softened, and for a moment Michael wondered whether she could not see a trace of sympathy upon her captor's fair face. It lasted only a second, however, before it faded, replaced instead with a wry smile. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I cannot comply with your request. For the moment, that is. I will drain your blood in due course, but I have no desire to do so now. The bandits I encountered earlier made for more than a satisfactory meal. I am so glutted I do not think I could drink another drop of blood. Then you mean to draw this farce out longer still? I'll draw it out for as long as I wish until I am sufficiently thirsty. There seems little sense in overindulging. Your blood would taste sweeter, I am sure, than a bandit's, but that only makes it more imperative that I save you until I truly want you. Though it was Micah's death Magdalena spoke of, there seemed something sultry, seductive even, in the way she stressed her words. Micah, who was unused to being wanted, found the blood pooling beneath her cheeks, despite the chill which clung to her. How would it feel, she wondered, when Magdalena brought her lips to her neck? Would it hurt? She supposed she would feel a pricking sensation as Magdalena's teeth sank into her flesh. And then... Now, won't you come with me? You'll catch your death of cold staying inside this dreary cell, and then you'll be of no use to anybody. If I am to enjoy you properly, I would prefer to do so while your body is still warm. Till she wants her? Oh my gods for all of this right now. What? Micah looked at Magdalena, her blue eyes uncomprehending. Are you really letting me go? In a manner of speaking, yes. Though I'll only be transporting you from one prison to another. Ayo. As your hostess, I don't believe that these quarters are wholly appropriate for a long-term stay, especially not for a fair maiden such as yourself. You will be in my abode for several days. I had to yawn, sorry. You will be in my abode for several days yet, I fear, until I have further need of you. Until then, I would like you to live in some measure of comfort. How unexpected. I didn't know that you were so gracious. Jan Taskara? Is that Taskara? Micah should ask her, what are we? I can be. I've hidden depths, you see, much like the forest that surrounds my humble abode. I do so hate to see you shiver so, and your skin is so pale, poor dear, you and I could almost be sisters. White skin may be fitting for us vampires, but it isn't so for maidens, not even the fairest in all the land. Now please, follow me. I doubt you've any real wish to stay here languishing, unless you mean to make a further martyr of yourself. No, Micah bit her lower lip. She was loath to accept kindness from Magdalena, but she did raise a fair point. It was cold in her cell, and miserable alongside it. And you yawned again. If she remained there overnight, it did not seem impossible that the blood in her veins might really freeze. Micah had already given up on her own life, but she did not want to die as a stray dog racked with shivers. If that is what you want for me, then I have no reason to refuse. How very biddable you are. The words which come from your mouth may be stubborn, but it seems you've experience when it comes to following orders. Of course I do. I'm a maid, like I said. Ah, yes, so you did. That would explain your servility. Part of me was hoping you might refuse so that I would be bidden to get. She could have. We could have been carried. I want her to carry me. But this is fine too, it spares me the effort. Shall we? Please, lead the way. Micah dropped Magdalena a curtsy, this time taking her dirty skirts between her fingers, the pads of which had turned pink from the cold. Magdalena smiled at this display. For a prisoner, you're awfully cheeky. What we could have had, that's what I'm saying. Then turned upon her heel and after bidding Micah to follow. Naturally, Micah obeyed. She could see she had little choice in the matter. We could have had it all. We could have had it all. Oh no, that's not the song. We used to have it all, but now's the curtain call. Magdalena led Micah down a twisting hallway packed full of cells identical to the one Micah and Henny had been imprisoned in. We could have had it all, rolling in the deep. You had my heart inside of your hand, but you played it to the beat. Micah tried not to peer into these cells as she passed them, but curiosity soon overcame her and she found her head swiveling. She feared, as she stared through the darkness, that she might encounter sights more horrific than she was capable of comprehending. Rusted torture instruments, or dead bodies. But it was so very dark in the bowels of Magdalena's home that Micah could scarce see anything. Not even the moonlight, which spilled intermittently through the barred windows, could fully illuminate the sprawling prison complex. This, Micah supposed, tearing her eyes away from one of the cells as she passed it, was probably a good thing. She had witnessed enough horrors for one night. Magdalena eventually brought Micah to the foot of a staircase, which led up from her subterranean cells. Careful, Magdalena cautioned Micah before they began their ascent. These steps are steep and slippery, too. If you fall, you may break your neck. Had Micah been less nervous, she might have laughed to hear her jailer fuss over her so. A broken neck did not seem so very cruel a fate when compared to Magdalena's designs upon her. Perhaps it would be quicker to die thus rather than having her blood drained. At the very least, it would be a swifter demise than freezing in her prison cell. Micah felt little in the way of humor, however, as she took the chill banister beneath her right hand and began to climb. She could recognize the irony in Magdalena's warning, though only vaguely. Her mouth felt hewn into a permanent line, as though carved from stone, her brow furrowed. It seemed unlikely she would ever smile again. The chill of the basement faded as Micah cleared the final step of the twisting staircase to emerge in the spacious hallway with the arched windows and candles flickering upon the stoned walls and sconces. The hallway was not very dissimilar in decor to her parents' home, though it was less ornate, the furnishings worn down by old age. It was apparent that Magdalena's home had once been noble, but it had clearly fallen to rot and ruin, its heyday long since past. The air in the ground floor smelled almost as rank as that in the dungeon, and every conceivable surface was heaped with inches of dust. There was so much dust, in fact, that Micah could feel it in the air when she inhaled. The dust irritated her eyes and nose and laid heavily, unpleasantly upon her tongue. Micah swallowed, hoping to void her mouth of the taste of decay, but in vain. The dust was so thick she sneezed, which prompted Magdalena to say, with a wryly amused smile, "Bless you." Thank you," Micah replied, abashed, and then, I thought you did not care for God or his teachings. I don't, but I presume you do. I thought you might appreciate it. I see. How very thoughtful of you. I know. For a vampire, I'm unusually sensitive. I like Lena a lot. Really, Micah thought as she canvassed the disused, dusty hallway, she would be more appreciative of if Magdalena would let her go. But that did not seem to be high upon Magdalena's list of priorities. Perhaps it would be best if she let go of such unfounded optimism. That would lead only to disappointment, and Micah had gorged herself on more than her fair share of that already. Mute with fatigue, Micah followed Magdalena to the end of the hall, wherein a wooden door was inlaid. Magdalena seized the brass handle and twisted it, then pushed it ajar. It stuck for a few moments, as though unwilling to move, but soon shifted, creaking as it did so. When the door swung back, it was to reveal a vast, spacious room with a ceiling so cavernous Micah had to crane her neck to see it. A large, ornate staircase was set in the center of the room, though it felt more like a chamber, which rose to the floor above it, and the banisters carved with fronds of ivy and bunches of grapes. This, Micah supposed, must have been the entrance hall. It had clearly been designed to impress, for its vastness was almost dizzying. Magdalena's home, could it really be a castle, was larger even than Micah's, and vast enough to be unnerving. Trapped within this scene of spoilt luxury, Micah felt smaller than ever before, a wooden doll rather than a grown woman rattling about in a playhouse. The entrance hall bore a wine-red carpet and stone walls, but it showed clear signs of deterioration. The dust was so profuse it made Micah's eyes wander, and several of the stone steps which led upwards were cracked and chipped. A grand piano could be found in one corner of the room, but its lid was shut, and Micah doubted it had been played, if it still could be played, in decades. There was a chandelier in the entrance hall, hanging aloft from the high, high ceiling, but when Micah craned her neck upwards, she could see even in the dark that it was festooned with spiderwebs. The house might have been grand once, but it was not so now. It seemed a wonder, really, that it still stood, when clearly it was uncared for. Your servants don't seem to be working very hard. Micah spoke lightly, her voice swallowed by empty air. Perhaps you ought to see to hiring new staff. My mistress would never permit. Micah brought her hand to the banister of the grand staircase, then drew it back wincing. The pads of her thumb and index finger were fuzzy with dust. This. Oh? Magdalena, who had already begun to ascend the staircase, turned to look at Micah and smiled. Are you judging my home, Micah? I would never presume to be so rude. I just thought it might feel more homey, that's all, if it were less of a pile. Magdalena laughed, then shook her head. You are quite right, of course, to judge. Please, judge away to your heart's content. I've never been much of a fan of this place, really. Its scale is too grandiose even for my liking. My great-grandfather, it was he who had this castle built, had more money than sense, I'm afraid, and absolutely no taste to back it up. A house has no need to be this large. But there was land enough for it and money too, and when a man has land and money and means, he will often think, well, why not? Practicality matters little in the decisions of great men, and neither, to my unending woe, does aesthetic sense. I can believe that. My own father, my master, rather, men, sigh, real. Men. Micah's face flushed at this gaffe, the tips of her ears turning pink. Half filled my own residence with pointless baubles. They were all very expensive, but not particularly cohesive. The parlor looked like a museum once he was through with it. It hardly seemed like a place to sit and relax. I was too afraid to spend any measure of time in there in case I broke something. Then it seems we have something, at least, in common. I found this place dismal even when my family was alive, and we had a legion of maids back then to keep everything spick and span. They kept the dust and cobwebs at bay, bless their hearts, but they couldn't combat the loneliness. Now, my family is dead and all our maids along with them. I can hardly take on new hires, being what I am, so my home was rather left to go to ruin. I clean what I can, but there's very much house to clean and only one of me. It's quite the overwhelming challenge. My attempts at cleaning have, over the last half-century, fallen quite by the wayside. I hope you can forgive my slovenliness. Oh no, it's fine. I understand. You're too kind. Magdalena's red eyes softened as they had in the dungeon, with something akin to sympathy. But before Micah could ponder this, her jailer turned. Oh, listen to me, prattle on. It is most inconsiderate of me when you must be tired. Let us make haste to your room. We've not long to go now. Micah followed behind Magdalena as a puppy might, almost grateful to her for the promise of a room and of a bed. It was as Magdalena said, she really did feel tired. She was more than ready to lie down beneath the warm covers, or even lukewarm covers, and sleep. Anything would have been better than the stone floor upon which she had been lying. Micah yawned, her eyes blossoming with tears anew, while pressing her right hand, fingertips still fleckled with dust, instinctively to her mouth. Oh? But half asleep though she was, Micah's senses were alert enough for her to detect a sudden noise. There came, through the yawning gulf of the entrance hall, a sound not dissimilar to that Micah had heard in the dungeon. It was a scream, or was it? Micah was unsure. This scream, was fainter than the one she had detected in the dungeon, and seemed to emit not from the ground under which the cells lay, but above her head. Was there another person concealed in Magdalena's abode? Someone other than herself? A ghost? Was it another captive, kept separate from the rest? Was it Henny? Magdalena. Lena, please. Magdalena is quite a mouthful. I would rather you use a nickname as you did with your mistress. Micah wished to contest this. Her relationship with Magdalena wasn't half so close so as to allow the use of nicknames, but she felt too tired to engage in an argument. I swear to God if it's Henny. No, we have to have more faith in Lena. What did it matter really how she addressed Magdalena when soon she would be dead? Lena, then. What was that noise I just heard? What noise? You didn't hear it? Micah stared at Magdalena, her expression one of patent disbelief. It wasn't very loud, I'll grant you, but it was unmistakable. I swear it sounded just like a scream. A scream, Magdalena pondered, one hand beneath her chin. Such sounds are not unheard of in my abode when I'm attending to a prisoner. Micah shivered. But there is nobody in your walls now, save me and you. Nobody living, at least. Then, it's not the imprisoned bandit? Certainly not. He will never make a peep again. I made sure of that with my own 2 hands. It would be hard for him to speak with half his throat torn out, you see. Oh. Micah pressed a hand over her own throat as if to check its integrity, and as she did so, choked. The air was so thick with dust it was hard for her to breathe. Now, dear, worry not. It was not your mistress who screamed thus, if that is what you are wondering. I am a woman of my word, and I promise I let her go. She is quite, well, she's not necessarily all right. But she is away from me and from my home, and there is the possibility that she may live to see another dawn. Then, who screamed? What was that sound? It must have been your imagination. You have overexerted yourself after this night's events. Anybody would be exhausted in your situation. It didn't feel like a dream, though. No? Magdalena shrugged in a manner which did not seem quite in keeping with her ladylike bearing. I suppose it must have been the wind, and it is very draughty in here. Is that all? That is all it could be, unless you mean to suggest that the dead can speak. Magdalena's red eyes bore into Micah, so intense Micah feared they would consume her. Unsettled, Micah glanced away. She could not stare into those red eyes for long without shivering. No, I wasn't suggesting that. Good. I know it is expected for women to lose their minds at the drop of a hat, but I've grown quite sick of being regarded as the weaker sex. I'm pleased to see that you're doing your level best to not let us down. Why, you haven't swooned even once, which is more than most men can say when I bring them here. It's really quite commendable. You might swoon, though, from a lack of sleep if we continue to tarry. Let us be off, or we shall never make it to our destination. Micah nodded and followed along behind her hostess anew. She could no longer hear the scream, but its memory haunted her all the same. Micah had heard, during the course of that night, all kinds of cries born from human misery, and she thought she knew enough now to distinguish such sounds from the howling of the wind. Oh, trust, I'm swooning, though. Yes, but we're swooning in a different way. That cry she had heard, though briefly, had not sounded like a breeze regardless of what Magdalena said. Micah was certain that the sound had belonged to a person, but why would Magdalena lie about such a thing? It was impossible to say. Here we are. Home, sweet home. So, Magdalena looked at Micah, an amused, almost roguish smile playing about her lips. What do you think? Micah examined the room mutely, her hands folded at her front. The chamber Magdalena had brought her to was dark, given the lateness of the hour, lit only by a pair of candles on either side of the bed. Micah could see, however, it was every bit as derelict as the rest of Magdalena's home, and even if she had not been able to see it, she would have smelled it. The air was frosty, as though it had been left to circulate inside the room for years upon end, which it most likely had. Every surface, meanwhile, that Micah could make out in the flickering candlelight was covered in dust. The sheets upon the bed, though neatly made, were wholly with age and with insects, as was the carpet upon the floor. It was a sad room, really, ignorant of human occupation for years, but it was still a superior set of lodgings to those in which Micah had awoken. At least this room had a bed, a four-poster one no less, like the one at Micah's home, with a mattress and sheets upon which Micah could rest her weary limbs. The bedchamber had a wardrobe too, though Micah possessed nothing to store in it, save the clothes upon her own back. There was a writing desk upon which lay a basin for waiting, and a chamber pot for more delicate business underneath. The pot was, thankfully, far cleaner than the one Micah had found in the dungeons. So white and spotless, she imagined it unused. The desk faced a large window, which was currently obscured by a set of dark blue curtains. Micah could not see beyond this window, though she doubted she would have been afforded much of a view even if she had drawn the curtains back. It was very late after all. It was not as cold in this room as it was in the underground cells, but it was not warm either. The wind crept in through fine cracks in the aged windows to toy with the reddish-orange flames of the two lit candles, to toy too with Micah's hair in the hem of her dress. She shivered. Do you not have a tongue in your head? Magdalena needled Micah, who had yet to speak. Don't tell me that you've come over all shy. I brought you to this room solely so that you might sleep. I have no wicked designs on your innocence, regardless of how pretty you are. She called us pretty again. I only want your blood, not your body, for now. I beg your pardon? Micah blinked at Magdalena, uncomprehending. What designs are you speaking of? You cannot tell? I'm sure I have no idea. None whatsoever. Lamau for now. None at all. I'm wholly ignorant of such affairs. Goodness me. Magdalena rolled her red eyes upwards to the ceiling, which seemed to sag beneath its own weight. I can't tell whether you are being dense on purpose or whether you really are that innocent. Did your mother never teach you what men and women do in chambers such as this? My mother did not know. She thought such topics beneath her. That was my governess's job, although... Micah frowned. I don't think that I would care to do much of anything in a chamber like this one. It smells like of a grave. Tut tut. Magdalena clicked her tongue. You're being rather rude about my home, you know. Here I am, trying to be a good hostess, and you throw my kindness back in my face. I know you do not like your home much either. You told me. Touché. I did try to pick out one of the pleasanter rooms for you, but there are so very many of them, it is difficult to keep abreast of them all. I rarely have visitors over, and when I do, they all get thrown into the dungeon. Well, maybe I can share your room. There seemed to be little point, therefore, in keeping these rooms spick and span. I hope you can forgive all the dust and the general disuse. Oh, I've more to take issue with than that. Yes, I suppose you do. You must have quite the bone to pick with me. Maybe I do, but not right now. I'm too tired. Yes, you do look it. Your face is frightfully pale. I think a good night's sleep is what the doctor ordered, provided you are able to rest, that is. That would be nice, but... Micah let her fingers trail across the brocaded covers of her bed, her expression pensive. What did you mean earlier when you said you'd no designs on my innocence? Dear me, I thought perhaps you were joking. But I can see that you're in no fit state for it. I don't tell jokes, I've little to laugh about. And you have even less to laugh about now, you poor dear. Magdalena cleared her throat. I meant only to say that I would not do unto you as a man might, regardless of our surroundings. I have no nefarious intentions, of that you can be assured. Micah thought of her governess's explanation of sex and of Walter's expectations come their wedding night and flushed. If the sudden rush of blush beneath her cheeks enticed Magdalena in any way, she did not show it, though her fingers did twitch in their tight, constricting gloves. I don't understand, Micah said after a pause, feeling, for all her reading, quite ignorant and unworldly. I know what men and women do behind closed doors, but how could two women set about something similar? It's not possible. You think so? I know so. My governess explained everything to me in great detail. When one wishes to make a baby, she's so sheltered and naive. Well, two women could not do that. There would be no sense to it. And you think people ought to only do things only because they make sense? That is quite narrow-minded. But people are often educated in such affairs, both in my time and your own. In some ways, the world has changed a great deal, yet in others. Well, never mind. I can see I'm only confusing you. You're so very innocent it hurts. Perhaps it is to be expected, though. Ladies ought not to know of such things. They are born and bred to be ignorant. What? Micah had not understood the full implications of Magdalena's previous lament, but she understood well enough what she meant by this. Why would you call me that? I already told you, I'm not a lady. I am Lady Henrique's faithful servant. Yes, you did say. And that is true. She is the lady, not I. You did labor that point quite intensely, yes, in the cells. You were so fervent about it, you almost had me fooled. I left for a bit and I come back to Micah having to talk. Yeah, at least you would have. If you weren't such a terrible actress. What? Oh, don't what me. It's quite tiresome. Did you think I would fail to notice all your fancy turns of phrase? Your vocabulary is that of a well-to-do young madame, not a maid, not even a lady's maid. You wear that sumptuous dress of yours easily, dirty though it is, and your bearing is definitely regal. You could never hope to pass as a common serving girl, not in a month of Sundays. Yeah, she knew. She knew 100%. I'm not stupid. Then Micah sank down on her bed, which creaked beneath her as if in warning. Her palms pressed to the mattress to support her weight, which all of a sudden felt excessive, and her heart was pounding like a drum. You knew from the beginning I was lying? Indeed I did. It was very obvious. I can tell you've no practice in deceit, Micah dear. You're much too sweet for it. But if you knew I was lying, why did you agree to let Henny go? Herr Gerard wouldn't lift a finger to aid Henny if she disappeared, but he will surely come looking for me. Herr Gerard? Is that the name of your fiancé? Yes, it is. And you do not refer to him by his Christian name? That is... Dear me, you mustn't be very close to the man if you addressed him in so distant a manner. Why, you make him sound like a stranger. She knew she was trapped in an unwanted life. Do you truly wish to marry him? I hadn't any choice. My parents... Ah, yes, it was silly of me to ask. That is how it always goes, isn't it? And what of your fiancé? Does he know you well enough to try and rescue you? I think he might. Micah swallowed, tasting dust on her tongue. He is an important businessman. He takes exacting care over his investments, or so I've heard. I imagined it would be the same for me too. I am a Von Essen after all. There would be a lot of prestige in wedding me. So that is how he regards you, as a profitable purchase? I cannot say. After all, I hardly know him and therefore cannot judge how he sees you. Does that sum it up? It is. Not entirely inaccurate, no. What a woeful state of affairs this is. It sounds like you would be wretched whether you were in my castle or out of it, particularly if the latter would entail being by this Herr Gerard's side. Perhaps I did you a favor by bringing you here. Micah did not respond to this. She did not want to give Magdalena the satisfaction. Well, never mind all that. Your fiancé can try to look for you if he likes. I do not care. I doubt he would be able to best me. But you said you wished to avoid all that. Did I really? Yes, you did. That's why you proposed letting me go. Oh yes, good memory. It would seem that the cold hasn't eaten away at all of your faculties. Not just yet, at least. As for why I changed my mind, well, that needn't concern you. I want to know why. But this is about me. Surely it must concern me. Oh, there was no real reason behind it. It was nothing more than an act of whimsy on my behalf. If you truly want to know why I went along with your chicanery, then, let us say I felt touched, that is all, upon seeing you throw your life away for the sake of your maid. Few mistresses would be capable of such compassion. It was truly remarkable. I didn't want your efforts to be in vain, that's all. And you are prepared to put yourself in danger for that? I won't be in any danger. I'm a vampire. I can shatter rib cages with a single touch. Or thereabouts, at least. Now, you really must get some sleep. It will be much better for you than asking all of these silly questions. But I have nothing to change into. What will I sleep in? I considered as much and took the liberty of stocking these drawers with some of my own clothes before I fetched you. You should find that they fit more or less. And they're clean, which is more than can be said for the rest of the linens in this place. There are books, too, on the shelves which you may read, and I drew up a basin of water for you to wash yourself in upon waking. You could find no better amenities in any inn. I do hope you have a pleasant night and sweet dreams. Magdalena smiled sardonically, then dropped Micah another curtsy. Just try not to breathe in through your nose if the smell bothers you. I would not want you to spend the night coughing. A fair lady such as you needs her sleep. Laughing to herself, Magdalena straightened, then turned. She departed, her long cloak trailing against the age-spotted carpet, and shut the door behind her. Wearing her clothes! Micah waited until she heard Magdalena's footsteps fade, then rose once more to her feet. She crossed the room, her legs trembling, and sneezed the doorknob between her fingers, but it stubbornly refused to budge. The door was locked. Well, of course it is. Micah sighed. What did I expect? Defeated, Micah returned to the bed. Weary from all that had happened, she collapsed on it, her loose hair strewn in spirals across the sheets. Staring at the ceiling, which was drenched in darkness, Micah muttered softly to nobody in particular. What am I going to do now? I suggest changing into the pajamas. I wish to see what Magdalena chooses to wear, please. Micah's question, of course, fell upon deaf ears. There was nobody in Magdalena's home to hear her. She was all alone. Holy crap. She's gorgeous. Holy crap. Micah tossed and turned uneasily that night in a bed which smelt of disuse and decay. The bed was more comfortable than the cell in which she had been held, but it was almost as cold, its thin sheets eaten away by old age and insects. At least the dungeon, with its sole wooden cot and its solitary window barred against the moonlight, was supposed to be inhospitable. This bedroom, meanwhile, was a different matter. Now we know why Lena let her stay with her. It was richly furnished, yet all its decorations had been ravaged by time's unrepentant advances. The men and women who must have stayed in this room once, more than a century ago, would surely be dead now. In that sense, the room felt akin to a crypt. Did that make the bed a sarcophagus? Micah a corpse? Magdalena had spared Micah's life for the present, but Micah doubted she would be so fortunate in the future. Magdalena was not, Micah reminded herself, a human, but a vampire. She meant to suck Micah of her blood, and when she did, Micah would lose her life, just as this room's previous inhabitant surely had. Okay, I think I'm gonna call it a night there. I was hoping for a better place to stop, but it looks like we're going into a lot of introspection, so I'm gonna call it there because it is getting late for me now. But thank you all for joining, and I am gonna find out maybe how much more is left of the demo and then decide whether or not I'm gonna stream it again. Because if we're almost towards the end, I'd rather just wait for the actual game to come out. But if there's still quite a bit left, I'll stream it again. But yeah, thank you guys for coming. Sweet dreams, will be thinking of them. True, I'm very interested in seeing how everything plays out. It'll be fun. But I like the world building so far. I'm looking forward to having more interactions with Lena and actually seeing how their relationship progresses. It'll be fun. It'll be fun for sure. But yeah, okay. What's up, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'll see you next time. I'll probably be streaming tomorrow around the same time. I'm gonna play Chef RPG, I think, unless I see another game that I'm more interested in. So yeah, otso and bye bye.